Good morning, everyone. I'm Trudy Marotta. I'm a volunteer community ambassador with AARP Virginia, and I want to welcome you to our 6th Scam Jam. AARP is active in many arenas that support individuals as they approach and enter into their retirement years. Retirement security is a main focus, and AARP wants to make sure that our seniors have sufficient resources so that they don't outlive their financial and their golden years and live them out in poverty. Another focus is preventing financial schemes and other scams that target today's older adults. Today's virtual event and in-person event, Stay One Step Ahead of the Scammers, is a joint effort between AARP Virginia and Fairfax County government's Silver Shield Task Force to share information with you and the tools to recognize scams and frauds to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your neighbors. No matter where you live, fraud is never too far behind, but you can protect yourself by knowing what to watch out for and to share your information with others if you have encountered a fraud or a scam. There are a number of ways that AARP can help you with that. You can go online to aarp.org and sign up for the Fraud Watch alerts delivered right to your inbox. There you will also see our scam tracking map so that you can learn the reported scams in your area and across the country. AARP Fraud Watch Network provides alerts, tips, and resources, and it's all free for everyone. There's also a toll-free number where you can talk to trained volunteers for more information and resources if you or someone you know has been a victim of a fraud or a scam. You can also like AARP Fraud Watch Network on Facebook to get the latest information on frauds and scams. You can also go to our free podcast wherever you download your favorite podcast. Ours is called The Perfect Scam and has many 30-minute episodes, including interviews with both con artists and law enforcement experts discussing how scammers operate and tips to guard against becoming their next target. Planning and organizing events like this sometimes takes a village. So please allow me to thank Jennifer Tisano of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute for allowing us to use this facility and the technical expertise to make this happen as well. And first, it's our pleasure to introduce from Congressman Gerry Connolly's office, Marlon DeBiase. Senator Connolly is with the 11th district, and he is responsible for shaping policy on issues including information, technology, and cybersecurity. So Marlon, if you'd come welcome our group.
Thank you, Trudy. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marlon DeBiase, and I'm the district director for Congressman Gerry Connolly. Fortunately, the congressman had an unexpected conflict, but sends his best wishes. But you know, we're happy to be here and represent this great community in Fairfax County and talk about a very important issue. And unfortunately, many of our community members are victims of scams. The Federal Trade Commission reported that consumers lost $2.6 billion in scams just last year. Over half was targeted to the older generation, and that was at $1.7 billion. So of course, as most older generation folks are being targeted for these scams, and as we close out on tax season, it's important to highlight some of the scams in disguise. And so the IRS imposter scams can involve messages and calls, but they're often emails or text messages which the IRS will never contact you by. So if you get a text or an email from the IRS, it is a high likelihood that that is a scam, but that is one of the main scam providers that have a front for the federal government. So as we move forward with technological advances, it is important to find different ways to combat this. The congressman last Congress helped enact the Senior Fraud Prevention Act, So this bill directs the Federal Trade Commission to establish an office within the Consumer Protection Agency to advise the FTC on preventing fraud targeting seniors. Also, the Congressman helped enact the Stop Senior Scams Act, which this is a bill that establishes a senior scams prevention advisory group, which creates a model of educational materials to help educate employees in financial service companies. So as we continue to build federal infrastructure meant to prevent fraud against seniors and serve as a resource to victims, we need to continue to hold those that we find guilty accountable. So there's still a lot more that we need to do, but we're happy to be here again. In our office, every year hosts a senior issues forum where scams and fraud is one of the main topics, and that will be held in the fall. The county and AARP both partner with us for that. So, happy to get that information out as we continue to develop that program for this year. But again, thank you so much for having us today, and I hope you all have a great program.
We are also delighted to have Virginia State Senator Chap Petersen with us today, representing the 34th District. Now I got that one correct. Senator Petersen has represented Fairfax County in the Virginia Senate since 2008. Chap, please join us.
Thank you, Trudy, and good morning, everybody. And I do represent the 34th Senate District for about 3 more months or 6 more months, and then I'll be moving to the 37th Senate District. I actually will not be moving. I'll have same house, same wife, same kids, same dog. But the map makers, who are infinitely wiser than me, have decided that the 34th has seen enough of me. And so I will be representing Fairfax City, Vienna, Tyson's Corner, Falls Church, and kind of all the area in between. So I picked up Tyson's Corner and the Mosaic. So my wife told me I had to go out and get a new wardrobe because I sort of had this single family, residential dad thing going on. And now that's not necessarily the vibe, but you know what? I'm 55, so it's hard to change. But anyways, listen, let me talk a little bit about this issue. And by the way, on a different time, I'd love to come back and talk about prescription drug reform, because that's something that AARP and I worked together with in Richmond. We got a bill out of the Senate, 26-13 with Republican support, which would have significantly reduced prescription drug costs in Virginia, both for Medicaid, which is a state taxpayer obligation, and also in the private market. So we're going to come back and have a talk about that, because that's something I'll be reintroducing. My real job is I'm an attorney. I tell people being a senator, it sounds important, but it's really part-time. It only pays $18,000 a year. We're in session 60 days of the year. So the other 305 days I'm in private practice. And one of the themes in my practice has been representing people, representing families who have been deceived, defrauded, embezzled, you name it. And sometimes it borders on criminal conduct. Sometimes it's just a contractor walks in, gets paid, walks off the job, you name it. There's a gray area all the way in between. And all I can tell you is the rule of thumb is always use due diligence and always bring in a third party to verify the transaction. And let me give you an example. Years ago, I represented a home builder. He was a gentleman who was in his 70s. He had built homes all over Northern Virginia. So he was someone who at least considered himself a sophisticated businessman. And he was approached by the son of a former partner who sort of enticed him with a chance to invest in a mine out in Nevada. And you put the money in and you'll get your money back plus 25% in 6 months. You know how it goes. And it was a significant investment. It was $500,000. And the son owned a beautiful house in Loudoun County and said, look, I'll put a deed of trust in my house with your name on it. And they prepared the deed of trust. So my client thought, oh, well, I'm protected. Well, it turned out the house already had 2 other deeds of trust on it. So that deed of trust had no value whatsoever. And it turned out the money that he wired to this young man to buy this mining interest within 24 hours had been wired into a gambling cage in Las Vegas to pay off a gambling debt. And we found all this out months later when I filed suit and took discovery and basically found out this was a long-running scam that had been going on. I referred it to the Commonwealth's attorney. Eventually, it turned out that this person had been doing these scams all over. He actually ended up doing time in federal prison. And it was really tough to see that someone who had worked their whole life, mostly with their hands, lost that money that fast, because that was a significant share of his retirement. So my advice is, and by the way, I'm 55. My mom is 81. My dad passed a few years ago. My advice is, when someone approaches you with a transaction, first, be skeptical. Secondly, always bring in a third party, preferably a professional. Doesn't have to be an attorney, although it should be, but someone who can just put a fresh set of eyes on it. If someone's offering you a short-term gain, it's almost always not credible. Okay. And I tell people, I believe in the free enterprise system. I've invested in properties, I've invested in companies, I've invested in myself. But typically I put my money with people I trust. Okay. Because that way I know where it is. And I trust them. So again, I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard before, other than just use common sense. That's kind of a theme I use in my life and with my children. I got 4 of them. I know y'all probably got a lot of kids out there too, or grandkids. But thanks again for coming. I apologize. I'm dressed a little bit informally. I got my old football coaching shirt on, but I'll be outdoor knocking today. And no, I don't wear the bow tie on weekends. Okay, everybody asking me that. Come on, guys, give me a break. All right, thank you again for inviting me. AARP is an awesome organization. I'm really proud to be here, and thank you again for letting me speak. God bless you.
Thanks. Although he couldn't be with us in person today, Fairfax County's lead district supervisor and chairman of our Board of Supervisors, Jeff McKay, has sent a welcome video. And Mike, if you could pull that up for me now.
Morning, and thank you for joining us for the 6th annual Scam Jam event. While I am unable to be with you in person today, this does not lessen the value that I place on protecting the safety and security of our residents, people like you and your families. Studies are showing a nationwide increase in cases and complaints related to financial fraud and exploitation. In fact, newly released Federal Trade Commission data shows that consumers reported losing nearly $8.8 billion to fraud in 2022 alone, an increase of more than 30% over the previous year. These scams come in many forms, from investor scams to imposter scams, many of which you'll learn more about how to recognize and how to avoid during today's event. And while we all recognize that our most vulnerable neighbors are certainly at greater risk, it's important to remember that anyone can fall victim to these scams if they are not educated about them. As attendees of our previous events have likely heard, we believe that protecting our older population begins with education. That's why in 2017 we launched Silver Shield, our all-inclusive campaign aimed at educating various groups in the community, older adults, families of seniors, residents, caregivers, and the general public. Our team has participated in over 250 events, which have touched about 52,000 people across the county. These events have included home and remodeling shows, community events around National Consumer Protection Week, and various in-person and virtual events like the one you're taking part in today. Your presence here, whether it be at the OLLI Mason campus or watching online from home, is an important step in protecting yourself. I hope you walk away today feeling empowered to recognize and avoid scams and fraud, and to talk to others to help them become better aware as well. Thank you for being a part of this, and enjoy today's Scam Jam.
Thank you, Mike. We also have here live in person Fairfax County Supervisor Pat Herrity, representing the Springfield District. Supervisor Herrity was instrumental in setting up the Silver Shield Fraud Prevention Task Force. He also serves as chair of the board of Older Adults Committees. So Supervisor Herrity, share the mic with me.
Thank you very much, Trudy. And I'm going to try to follow instructions and keep this real short so we get on to hearing from the experts. But it's great to be back here every year. I try to make this event every year because it is so important. As chairman of the Older Adults Committee, it's been my priority to help our older adults and kind of lead the board's response to the aging population that we have here in Fairfax County. In scams, as our surveys show, are one of the big concerns of all of our older adults, which is why programs like this are so important. Silver Shield and the Scam Jam came out of the award-winning 50+ Community Action Plan, which we helped create and the board approved. And we're now working on Shape the Future of Aging Plan. It is a priority in that plan as well. So you've got the board's continuing commitment to addressing this. Obviously, whenever I think of older adults, I start with my mom. And as much as we tried to keep her from being scammed, she fell victim to a scam. Fortunately for her, it was only $600. And she wrote my sister into it, and she lost another $600, which that was the harder one to understand. Sorry, Mary Beth, I shouldn't have said that. But you're going to hear, you just heard from Chap, and then you're going to hear cases later today, $900,000 in Fairfax County. It is serious, and it is bad when we have seniors that lose their entire life savings. So I'm going to cut that and just go with thanks. I want to thank AARP in Fairfax County Silver Shield Task Force for sponsoring this event, bringing it together. Our wonderful Fairfax County Police Department, Fairfax Adult Protective Services, the FBI, U.S. Postal Service, all of whom have helped make this event possible today. I'm going to hang around a bit and learn something because I always learn something from this event. I've already learned a few things and I will continue to. Also want to thank OLLI for all the great work that they do out in our community, and we're working on getting them more out into our community as we work to address other senior issues in our community. So thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for all of you online, and have a great program.
And last but not least, we also have Fairfax County Supervisor James Walkinshaw representing the Braddock District. James also serves as Vice Chairman on the Older Adults and Public Safety Committees. James, come join me.
Well, thank you, Trudy, and thank you all for coming out today. I want to welcome you to the Braddock District. I'm so fortunate to represent really a spectrum of aging services in the Braddock District, including first and foremost OLLI, of course. We recently, just last year, opened a Senior Wellness Center at Braddock Glen. Wonderful facility for seniors to educate themselves and get health screenings and all kinds of amazing things happening there. You have seen, if you've driven on Braddock Road recently, the rapid construction of Woodley Chase active retirement community. I told my wife, the good news is we never have to leave the Braddock District. We can move from our home in Annandale to Woodley Chase, and across the street is a Fairfax Memorial Funeral Home. So when the time comes, just wheel me across Braddock Road, and she might have other ideas as to what she'll be doing at that time. But, when we talk about aging, I always quote Henry Ford, and Henry Ford got a few things wrong in his life, but he got this right. He said, anyone who keeps learning is young, and anyone who stops learning is old. And those of you who are participating with AARP or with OLLI, congratulations, you are young because you're still learning and you're here today to learn. And this is such an important topic, as Supervisor Herrity said. right here in Fairfax County in the Braddock district, I have a constituent who in 2021 was scammed out of $150,000. And that case is still pending. Unlikely they're going to recover that money. We've seen a sophisticated grandparent scam in which victims are led to believe they have to pay a ransom to keep their grandchildren out of jail or harm. Think of anything more disgusting and despicable than that. There's an ongoing scam where scammers who pretend to be law enforcement or court personnel call residents and say they owe fines for missing jury duty that they did not actually miss. And residents have paid the fines, unfortunately, to scammers, or they show up to the courthouse wondering when they're supposed to serve on that jury. We've seen shopping scams, prize, sweepstakes and lottery scams, internet service scams, and false business and job opportunity scams. And that's why the work of Silver Shield and the work that you all are doing here today is so important. I want to thank Melissa, who coordinates the Silver Shield Awareness Program for Fairfax County. She has a tough game of whack-a-mole to play every year with these different scams and raising awareness. But I can tell you that Fairfax County and the Board of Supervisors are committed to working to protect older adults from these scams. I'm very proud that in the 4 years that I've been on the board, we have increased funding for aging services by nearly 25%. And when we adopt the budget, I think on Tuesday, we're going to continue those increases because we recognize how important it is to work with our older adults and protect them from these scams. So thank you all for coming out today. Thank you for participating in this process. And thank you to AARP for organizing it.
So let me introduce you to my partner in crime for the past 6 years. This is our 6th annual Scam Jam, and Melissa Small has put up with me in organizing this. When I say it takes a village, it definitely takes a village, and AARP could not do it without the help of Melissa and the Silver Shield team. So let me have Melissa join us. Melissa Small is branch chief with Fairfax County's Land Development Services, and as part of the public outreach program is the coordinator of Fairfax County's Silver Shield Task Force. Tell us more about the task force, Melissa.
Thank you very much. I think it's already been talked about because of all the other speakers, but I will delve in a little bit more. Thank you to the Board of Supervisors. They are the ones that actually got us all together. We have 9 different departments that are helping us in Fairfax County, including AARP. So what we've been doing, other than virtual events and in-person events, the Scam Jam that's been so important to us, we are actually also helping the Fairfax County Police investigate these complaints. So I have an inspector who helps with building code complaints with the contractors who are taking money from our individuals. I've sat in court with them over the last 10 years. Again, the police are the lead investigators. We actually have a case right now that is going to court in 2 weeks, and the man was taken for $900,000. And my inspector determined, along with the police, that none of the work actually is of value, and they've actually created problems in his house. So he's going to have to get those fixed at some point. They convened a interjurisdictional grand jury this past summer, and they were trying to get as much information as they could because there were some reluctant witnesses. So they said, you know what, we'll just do this interjurisdictional grand jury, and they were able to get the information they needed to move on. So I want to thank my partners. I'm with Land Development Services. We have folks from Neighborhood and Community Services, the Department of Family Services, Department of Cable and Consumer Services, the Fairfax County Courts. They've come on in the last year, and they've been instrumental in getting us information about what's happening at the courthouse, because they have people who come to their counters who are needing help and have maybe be scammed or, help prevent scams. The Department of Emergency Management and Security, especially with hurricanes and natural disasters, they get information out because contractors will come from across the country to, if it's in Virginia or a different state on the East Coast where a natural disaster has occurred, they're going to travel the country to scam our folks. Of course, the Fairfax County Police Department, we can't do it without them. The Department of Public Works and Environmental Services, they've actually helped the police on tree complaints, because that somehow these scams start with going door to door, is starting with tree scams. Either the tree is too big and it's going to fall on your house, or the limbs are going to affect your gutters. So they actually have helped the police investigate those complaints. So it's been a real great, or time that we've been able to get other organizations to help our police department. So like everybody has said, it takes a village. It will take a village. Where, we have a long way to go, and I'm excited about today's program. So thank you for coming both virtually and in person. And thanks again.
And now I get the pleasure of introducing our two keynote speakers. But before I do that, I just remembered that I forgot to add at the top of the program that today's program is being recorded. You will get a link to that recording in a follow-up email. We will have time for questions at the end of the first and second parts of the program. So if you here in the room could raise your hand, I will get a microphone to you. And for those in our virtual audience, if you could put your questions in the chat box. I have one of our colleagues with the AARP Virginia monitoring the chat box as well. Our speakers this morning are Paul Greenwood and Kate Kleinert. Kate's story is one of millions reported to AARP's Fraud Watch Network every year. She shared her story with the Senate Special Committee on Aging and has graciously agreed to share her story with us here today. But first, I'm going to start our program with Paul Greenwood. Paul is one of AARP's fraud fighting experts. He's a retired San Diego Deputy District Attorney and headed up the Elder Abuse Prosecution Unit for over 20 years, prosecuting over 750 cases of physical, emotional, financial elder abuse. Mr. Greenwood also provides training to law enforcement and adult protective services agencies across the country. So please give a warm welcome to Paul Greenwood.
Well, thank you so much, Trudy. Good morning to you all. It's great to see a room full and also online. A special thanks, especially to AARP for the organization. You want me to move? Oh, to be on the camera. I suppose that helps, doesn't it? Sorry. Okay, I see now. Okay. Have you ever met a lawyer who's never been shy of the camera? No, of course not. Silly me. And but AARP have been phenomenal in organizing this event. Your volunteers, your paid staff members, thank you so much. And a special thanks to your supervisors, to the Congressman's office, to the state senator who was here. It really is important, as Melissa has acknowledged, to get the backing of your local government in what we're trying to do, which is pursue the predators who are out there trying to take advantage, particularly of older adults. I've been a very proud member of AARP for 21 years. Oh, I just gave away my age. Oh, how silly of me. And I know you heard Trudy tell you that I'm a former deputy district attorney from San Diego, but you're thinking, you don't sound like a Southern California dude. Are you an imposter? No, I'm not. I'm very blessed that my wife imported me 32 years ago to San Diego. And my wife, bless her heart, is sitting right there in the back. She's the love of my life. Can you just start, darling? This is Sue Greenwood. And in August, we'll be celebrating our 45th wedding anniversary. So that's the reason we live in San Diego, I was born and raised in the UK, and I was a lawyer in England for 13 years. I also want to give special thanks to a very person who's become a very dear friend of ours, and that is Liz Buser from AARP. Liz, can you just wave your hand? This is Liz. Liz and another colleague, Seth, were very instrumental in reaching out to me. You know, I made a very tough decision back in 2018 at the age of 66 to move on from my career as a prosecutor. I felt deep in my heart that I wanted to share lessons that I'd learned in the courtroom on how to protect older adults, because I had been face to face with predators through the courtroom and prosecuted them. And I felt that there was something that I should be doing to pass on the information. Well, little did I know that AARP came calling. And it was a wonderful fit for me. And this has been just an exciting part of my career, is having opportunities like this to share with you. So thank you, Liz. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, AARP, for allowing me to do this. And during this wonderful journey with AARP, I've also had the opportunity to meet some amazing people. And you're going to meet one now, Kate Kleinert. And I'm going to allow Kate to tell her story in a minute, but you'll excuse me because I will politely interrupt her. She doesn't know when, she doesn't know how, but I will interrupt her because I love to ask questions. Now, half the time, I don't know what question I'm going to ask. And it's fun when you're in the courtroom and you're kind of, but you know, you listen to where the witness is taking you in the story. And there were times when I will interrupt Kate and say, oh, excuse me, explain that a bit more. Kate has got an amazing story. There's two things that I've learned that we have in common, at least two things. We're both avid tea drinkers. And secondly, we share the same birthday. Isn't that right? March 15th. Both our mothers said, beware the Ides of March. Okay. So Kate, why don't you join me? And Kate's said she's willing to stand, but if you want to, feel free to have a seat. But so Kate's going to join us. So I'm just going to ask you, first of all, to introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us where you're from and what you do in your career.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here. And I'm so grateful to be able to tell my story. It was almost worth going through to be able to help people along the way. I was originally living in Glen Olden, Pennsylvania, which is in Delaware County. And I'll get to why I moved, but 2 weeks ago, I moved to Lancaster and had a tremendous amount of help from AARP and the IAFCI, who came to help me that day move in. So it's been wonderful. I was an executive secretary during my career, and I left my job when my husband became so ill that someone needed to be with him full time. So I stayed with him for 2 years, taking care of him around the clock until he passed. And since then, I have been taking in hospice dogs because I learned things from taking care of my husband. So taking care of the dogs just kind of was a natural progression for me. It doesn't bother me to give shots or change bandages or fix IVs or what have you. So, and then this happened, and now I'm on a speaking tour most days out telling my story.
And so what was, prior to becoming on a speaking tour, what was your main primary career in, and what else have you been doing with the Catholic community?
I am a secular Franciscan, which no one probably in this room knows what that is, but that's okay. It's the greatest secret of the Catholic Church. St. Francis thought that there were a group of people who wanted to do more with their faith, but not quite as much as becoming a nun or a priest. So he started an order for lay people. And I am what is known as the regional minister. I have 723 seculars that I watch out for, and that keeps me pretty busy too. Wow.
You mentioned your late husband. Can you, if you don't mind telling us, when did he pass away?
Ernie passed away in 2009. He had been sick on and off for 10 years. And it was always a thorn in my side that we never had children. Mm-hmm. But when it came time that he was sick, I saw the wisdom of that, because I could not have taken care of him around the clock like I did if we had young children running around that needed to be taken to soccer or what have you. So sometimes blessings are hard to swallow, but they're there.
And after several years, obviously readjusting to life as a widow, did there come a time when you decided that you wanted to reach out socially to find possibly a friendship somewhere?
No.
Until when?
I never did. I never went on a dating site. I never had a friend try and fix me up. It just was not what I wanted to do. My heart was still married to my husband. So I did go on Facebook, but not looking for someone.
And what happened on Facebook, which led to this story beginning?
It was in August of 2020, and we were in the lockdown then. We had all been locked in for several months at that point. And although I listed myself as a widow on Facebook, which probably was a mistake, but I had received many requests, friend requests from all kinds of gentlemen, and never answered them. I would never accept friendship from any of them. But this one day, this man sent a friend request. He was very handsome, said he was a surgeon working in the Middle East through a contract with the UN, and read my profile. He loved dogs too, loved gardening, loved all the things I had listed, and just wanted to get to know me. So I don't know what in the world made me hit that accept button that day, but I did. And I accepted his friendship, and life has not been the same since.
So I'm not on Facebook, but when you get a request like that, did he actually attached a photo? Did he?
Yes, yes, very handsome man. I don't know. Can you bring up that first slide, please?
And while we're doing that, what else did he tell you? That he was a surgeon working where?
In Iraq. He was there, like I said, through this contract with the UN. Very handsome man. Although I couldn't figure out what in the world he wanted with me, but you know, I don't know whether I just said what the heck and went for it, but that he was widowed as well, had 2 young children, because he had been married to a much younger woman, and his kids were supposedly 12 and 15. So that's why they were younger. And he told me he was my age, but none of that's true.
When you accepted his invitation, how quickly did he start communicating with you, and what form did that communication take?
For the first couple of days, we just messaged back and forth on Facebook. But then he said he really wanted to hear my voice, and could we start talking through an app? And he asked me to download Hangout, which I believe is not available still. It's turned into Google Chat or the WhatsApp app. And I have since learned that those apps are not traceable by anyone. And that's their advertising, that no one can trace any calls that are made through that system. So we did start to talk, and I have to say, it had been many years since I'd had a conversation with a man like that. And it was really nice to hear somebody say at the end of the day, "How was your day, honey?" You know, there wasn't anyone in my life that said that. So I guess I got sucked into that, but
so you would hear his voice through what, your computer or through a phone?
Through our laptops. It would ring like a phone call, but I would just go answer that, and we talked through. So there was never any face-to-face meetings with him.
Did you ever ask him to try to go on a website where you could actually see his face?
Yes, I did. And he told me that being in Iraq and being in the war zone like he was, it wasn't safe for him to show his face. And he really, talked that up, that he couldn't do this. So I kind of believed him. There was enough truth, I think, to that it was credible to me that he wasn't allowed to show his face.
And so how often would you have this hangout with him? Would it be like on a daily basis or weekly or what?
Oh, it was daily. And after a while, it was 5 or 6 times a day.
Wow.
Can you do the next slide, please?
So what's this?
these are some of the things that he said to me. He certainly knew what to say. He was a charming, handsome man, very charming. That quote in the middle, when I first saw you, I was afraid to talk to you. When I first talked to you, I was afraid to like you. When I first liked you, I was afraid to love you. Now that I love you, I'm afraid to lose you.
How soon after he started this communication with you did he send that or say that?
Fairly soon. I have since found that on the internet. It's not his words, but part of a romance, I think a romance handbook, that's where it came from.
And what else? Let's see now. If you ask me when I want to be with you, my answer will be now and forever, Tony. When did he say that?
Oh, somewhere along the line. He got romantic very quickly. And I pushed back because I didn't even know this guy. And I hadn't been in conversations with the man for many years. And for him to suddenly say, I love you, it's like, what the heck is that? I'm not ready for that. I am nowhere near that.
Sure.
Thank you so much for sharing the story, and thank you for this session. I just wondering, when you received the request from him, out of curiosity, you didn't type his name to search more about him, about his background, about his being engaged with the UN. UN is a very famous organization, and to get more to know who is he
Before he was, yes.
Just curious to know what.
I did. And for the first few days, he had a Facebook account with these pictures and, but no friends listed, which I should have, that should have been a, red flag right there. It did have the same sort of information that he had given me was on that Facebook page, but that disappeared. And so did his friend request to me. I don't know how the world he did that, but so I didn't have anything to hold on to or try to find out who he was or where he was coming from. But at that point, I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I just thought I hit the jackpot.
And before he engaged in this relationship with you, had you heard about what people commonly refer to as the romance scam?
I don't think I really heard the words romance scam. I knew you couldn't trust all these folks on Facebook or other social media. And that's why I never accepted a friend request from the others, because I was seeing a trend on those pictures of people who were asking me to be a friend. They were either military or so many of them were on an oil rig somewhere, which I'm sure, fed into their needing money and not being able to have it where they were.
How long sometimes would these conversations on Hangout be for? 5 minutes, 10 minutes or longer?
It depended. And looking back, if I started to question him, he'd say, oh, there goes my beeper. I've got to get back to the hospital.
And so there were times when you would probe him for information about his background. Is that right?
Yes.
So give us an example of the type of question you would ask him.
Well, he sent me pictures of himself almost every day. He had quite a collection of these pictures, and they do not look like someone my age. And I would say, you look so young. And no. And I finally said to him one day, quick, what year were you born? And he said, oh, I've got to go. And when he called me back, he said, 1953. I said, how long did that take you to figure that out? To subtract it and be the same age as me. And again, there was this little voice in the back of my head, but I wasn't prepared to listen to it.
So how did the relationship develop after that, after this initial backwards and forwards? What happened next?
Well, he wanted the kids to get involved with this relationship, and he told me he had asked them to call me mom. Now, that is my Achilles heel. You know, I waited all my life for somebody to call me mom. And I think that he looked at my Facebook profile and didn't see pictures of kids or grandkids. So maybe he figured out I didn't have children. So he started talking about the kids and how we were going to be a family, and he wanted to get married. It went so fast. But
How old were these children supposedly?
12 and 15, and they were supposed to be in England in a boarding school while he was in Iraq fulfilling his contract.
Okay, and the 15-year-old was a girl or a boy?
Girl.
And so the 12-year-old was a boy?
Mhm.
Okay. So then how did he introduce them more into the conversation?
He sent them my email address. Now, and again, looking back, he never had them talk to me like we were talking, because either he was acting as the two kids or someone else in that business office were acting as the two kids. But they wrote to me, called me mom, loved me, couldn't wait till we were all together again. And, you know, it was really something that my heart yearned for.
So you were actually corresponding through email with these supposedly children
Two
in a
kids.
boarding school in England.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes.
And were you also sending emails to Tony as well or not?
Every once in a while, if he would ask me for a picture of myself or something, and he was so good, he knew that the dogs meant a lot to me. So he knew the names of every dog. And if one of them barked while we were on the phone, he'd say, "Oh, is that Trixie? Oh, is that Duffy?" And that endeared him to me because he took that interest in the dogs. So,
And how many dogs were you caring for during this period of time?
6.
And we'll talk about those a bit later, but okay, 6 dogs under one roof with
me.
you.
Yes.
Wow.
I've had as many as 9. 6 was easy.
Okay, amazing.
Yes.
So when was the first time that money was ever discussed between you and Tony?
Well, it started with his daughter sending me a frantic email that apparently during the night she had become a woman, if you get my drift, and was scared to death. And I'm thinking a 15-year-old girl in this day and age doesn't know what's happened. How can that be? But his wife had been dead for 3 years, that's what he told me, and she had had leukemia. So obviously she was sick for a few years prior to that. So that would have made her, I don't know, 10 or 12. And maybe the mom was too sick to have that talk with her. So the mother and me, of course, came out and I'm like, oh my gosh, let me help you. And she wanted to go to the store in the campus there and get what she needed. And she said, "Don't tell my dad, please don't tell my dad," she said in her email. But of course I did. And he asked me to get her a gift card. That was the first request for money,
And how much did he suggest the gift card should be for?
$100
And did he suggest where you should buy that gift card?
at a local pharmacy, grocery store, anywhere that they sold them.
And what type of gift card did he recommend that you buy, or did he not make a recommendation?
He did. He wanted a Visa card. Sometimes he called them a wallet, which I wasn't familiar with that term.
Had you ever purchased one of those prepaid Visa gift cards before in your life?
No, no.
And so the first time you actually went to the pharmacy and did that, did you need help to actually pay for that?
No, they're on a rack usually somewhere in the store, and I found the kind that he had asked for and just went to the counter and paid for it.
Okay. And then what were the instructions once you've paid for it? What did you have to do in terms of getting the money to this supposed daughter?
Well, again, I'm saying to him, I'm in the United States. How am I going to get this to her in England? And he said, you just take a picture of the front of the card and the back of the card and the receipt and email that to her. And I did that. And then I checked on the number to see what balance was on there, and it was already gone. So it's very quick. And I kept saying, but in the United States, you can't take a picture of a gift card into a store and say, here, I want $100 of merchandise for this picture. But he said apparently it's the way of the world over there.
And just to give us an idea of time frame, approximately how many weeks or months was it from the beginning when he first asked you to be a friend to when that $100 gift card was made?
It was 3 or 4 months before that hit.
Okay. And then what was the second incident requesting money?
Well, then his son was pouting because his sister had gotten a gift card. Now he wanted one. And then after that, it was, they both had come down with COVID and they needed medicine. Then they needed the special masks that were pretty new at that time, the N95s or whatever,
right.
yes. And they were $100. Everything was $100.
So was there a second request for another $100?
Yes, yeah. And then he needed money because he was in Iraq and he couldn't carry money. It was way too dangerous. So, he needed, and again, this I don't understand, but he needed money to increase his signal to be able to call me, which that didn't make sense to me either. But he insisted that that's how it worked over there.
So how much was he asking for with his first request for himself?
I think he asked for 150 the first time he
Okay.
asked, but then he needed better food. He was just eating what everybody else was eating in the cafeteria and he wanted something better. So money went for that and it just continued.
Did you ever ask him, well, you're a surgeon, you're obviously on a good salary. How come you need this money from me? Did you ever ask him that?
I did. And he said, I'm going to pay you back the minute I get to Philadelphia. I have money. It's in a bank account in the United States. And when I kept pushing about it, he sent me, he had supposedly a bank account at Bank of America. He sent me his sign-on name, his account number, and his password. And I went on the website, of course, using the link that he sent me, but it was incredibly accurate looking. It was unreal. I'm looking at this and it's the banner streaming across the top, Bank of America. And I put in his name and password and up came his picture, his name, and a balance of a little over $2 million.
So just to clarify, for anyone listening, he sent you to a bogus website.
Yes.
Masquerading as Bank of America account, but it was all
Yes.
cultivated by him and his cronies. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. In total, how much was he asking you to give him approximately?
Well, it was little bits at a time, but it was adding up to where now it was affecting the way I was living because I was sending him all my money. But he then asked me to write a letter to his superior at the UN to give him leave to come to Philadelphia so he could meet me and pay me back. And could you do the next slide, please?
So now he starts talking to you about actually coming to meet you
Yes.
in Philadelphia. So what's this, Kate?
There's a picture of this same guy in the airport. And he called me and said, the next time we talk, honey, I'll be standing right next to you. Oh, wait, they're calling my flight. I've got to go. And I had also sent him money for the airfare to come here.
That's a very expensive pair of headphones he's wearing right
Is it?
there. Oh yeah, those are $350 at least.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh. Well,
Yeah. Okay, so this is supposedly in Iraq, is it? Is this what he's trying to tell you?
yes, yeah.
And he's about to fly to Philadelphia.
Mhm.
Okay. And when he was telling you prior to him supposedly coming, had he been asking you for more money to pay for the airfare or what?
His liaison, the man I sent the letter to, asked for the airfare, that it had to be, sent to cover him to come home. And that man said, would I please make sure he gets an invitation to the wedding?
So this letter that you were asked by Tony to write to his superior, how did you send that letter? Was it through an email attachment?
Yes.
And that was to another email address, was
Yes.
it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And then did you get a response from that email saying, could you please cover the airfare?
Yes,
And approximately how much was that?
$1,500.
Okay. After that request, was there any other request for money?
Not right then. He was supposed to come to Philadelphia on December the 10th. And we had this plan that because we were still under lockdown, my family was not going to be meeting for Christmas, but we had planned a Zoom, a family-wide Zoom. And I had this wonderful plan that I was going to come on the Zoom first and then tell them Santa Claus came early to my house and have Tony come in and sit down and meet them. Because I hadn't said anything to anyone at that point.
And why was that? Why did you deliberately keep that from your was it siblings?
Three sisters.
Three
yeah.
sisters. Why did you keep it from them?
I think somewhere in the back of my head, I was telling myself, when he gets here, then you can say something, but don't say anything before that, because I'm sure some part of my brain knew this wasn't right. But
did he provide you with a flight number?
No, he's from the UN. They were sending him here,
But he told you approximately what time and what day he was going to be arriving at
Yes.
Philadelphia Airport?
He was arriving December 10th at 10 p.m. At the time, I lived 2 miles from the Philadelphia airport. So I spent most of that day getting all gussied up. I had a new dress. I got my hair done. I had a bottle of champagne, and I'm waiting for him to call me and waiting and waiting. And I sat all night. And even with that happening, I was afraid something happened to him. I didn't for 1 minute think at that point that it was a scam. I thought something happened, but because I didn't have a flight number, I couldn't check on that.
So when was the first time you heard from anybody as you waited all night long for him to arrive?
It was about 8 a.m. the following morning. And it was another person. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have questions at the
Yeah.
end. Yes.
So 8 a.m. the next morning from
There's
another person.
another person called, and he said he was Tony's lawyer. And that when Tony went to get his luggage off the carousel at the airport, 2 policemen stepped up and arrested him, saying that there were drugs in his bag. Well, he's coming from Iraq. That didn't seem too far-fetched to me. I didn't think he brought them, but somebody could have put them in his bag. But now he needed bail money to get out of jail. And the price of that was $20,000. And I said, I don't have $20 left. I can't do it. Oh, don't you love him? Don't you want to make sure he gets out of this jail? He's so upset being there. You really need to get him out of jail. And I said, I'm not lying. I don't have any money for bail. Well, how about selling your life insurance policy? How about selling your car? He'll buy you another car as soon as he gets out of jail. He's got the money. And I said, no, I wasn't going to do that either. And then he asked me if I would go to my family. And I thought, that's the last thing I want to do, is go ask my sisters for bail money for a fiance that they don't even know exists. So he pushed a lot. And then I asked if I could be put on the visitors list to go see Tony. If he was in Philadelphia, I was 2 miles away. Oh, no, only the lawyer is allowed to go in to see him. And then when it wasn't working, Tony started calling me and he was crying and, oh, he was terrible. He needed a gift card. I said, what are you going to do with a gift card in jail? I need better food. I said, well, it doesn't work that way in the United States. I need a better signal. Well, then he started calling me like 5 and 6 times a day again, begging me for this money. And I'm like, wait, buddy, you don't get privileges like that in prison here. You don't get to make 5 or 6 phone calls a day. Oh, yes, I've got special privileges. I'm here from the UN, so they have to give me privileges. So like, it's now kind of creeping up on me. The lawyer called me again and I said, I want to go see him. So get me on the list. He's been transferred. Said, where did they transfer him to? Oklahoma. Now, why would someone from Philadelphia be transferred to Oklahoma? I don't think this man did his homework in geography to figure out that's not how it would have gone. And that's when the bomb went off in my head. And I really couldn't deny it anymore. You know,
And in terms of because you said I don't even have $20 left to give to you, how much in total did you calculate you had over the course of all those months sent his way?
$39,000.
Okay.
And it was all that I had. I used the end of my husband's life insurance, which killed me. My savings was gone. My 401k was gone. I truly had no money left. And $39,000 might be not such a big deal to someone who has more money, but to me, it was everything I had.
And here we are running up to Christmas of 2020. Did you actually spend Christmas or with your family or on Zoom with your family?
We did do the Zoom, and thank God that's how we were together, because my sisters would have taken one look at my face and know that something was terribly wrong, because I think I cried from December 10th to Christmas Day over being heartbroken that this wasn't real, that someone really didn't love me. Someone didn't want to marry me and spend their life with me. And the only presents I had bought that year were for his kids.
And I mean, I don't want to probe too much, but did you have any money to spend on your siblings or not?
No, because we were doing the Zoom, and my one niece and her husband and 2 kids were on a sailing trip over in Turkey, and we were going to wait and have Christmas when they came home.
Okay.
So I didn't need money for gifts at that point.
So you had a Christmas Day Zoom call with your siblings, did you? And did you put on a brave face?
I sat back pretty far from the camera so you wouldn't see exactly what I looked like. But yes, I did.
And I'm assuming during that Zoom call, you didn't mention anything about what was going on?
No.
Okay.
No.
How long did it take you before you actually did share that story with one of your siblings?
March.
And what triggered in March to make you talk to a sibling about that?
Well, I still do have a very dear friend who kept calling me and saying, I hear something in your voice. There's something wrong. If you want to tell me, fine. If you don't want to tell me, that's okay too. And after a while, she said, you really need to tell your sisters. And I said, no, I can't do that. She said, no, you've got to tell them because maybe they could help you. And I'm like, no way. I don't want to ask them for money. I don't want to do that. But it took her 3 months to talk me into it.
And so did you make a phone call to a sister?
No, I set up a Zoom because I have 3 sisters and I really wanted to tell them all at the same time so that they all heard the same thing. And knowing my sisters, I didn't want to talk to the oldest and then hang up and talk to the middle one. Now the first one's going to call the 4th one and they're all going to be in a tizzy, so I wanted to tell them at the same time. So I sent them all a text, I think, on a Friday and said, I need to talk to the 3 of you. Can you do a Zoom Sunday night? There's something I need to tell you. Now, in my head, the conversation also went like, it's not physical. I'm not sick. But apparently I did not put that in the text. So the 3 of them spent the weekend worrying and talking to each other like, what do you think it is? I'm sure it's cancer. And they were so upset. So when I told them what had happened, they were relieved.
Now, before that conversation in March, had you ever thought about approaching law enforcement to tell them what had happened to you?
Well, again, my friend said, you've got to report this. You just have to. And I lived in a very little, I wouldn't even call it a town, a little area. And you call the police and leave a message. That's how it works there. They never called me back. And it took a lot for me to get my nerve up to call because I would have to tell the story to a stranger. And I was so afraid they were going to say, how stupid could you be? Or how in the world could you have fallen for that? And I didn't want to hear it. I was doing enough of that to myself at the time. I didn't need anybody else to tell me. But my friend kept pushing me, and I called the state police. And when I called there, I got a woman, and I was so grateful because I thought it would be easier to tell the story to a woman. And her reply was, "Why did you call here? This isn't a crime." Well, by that point I was crying, you know, and I'm saying, "But he was supposed to pay me back all this money." And she said, "You gave it to him, hun." And that was the end of the conversation. So
And did that conversation occur before you spoke to your sisters or after?
before,
Okay.
yeah,
So then you had this difficult conversation with your sisters who actually turned out to feel relieved.
yes, they were really,
But did any of them give you any more advice or encourage you to go in a different direction other than the police?
well, my sisters, thank God, were very wonderful to me, and they didn't say any of the things that were already in my head. They told me how brave I was.
Hmm.
And I was floored by that. And within 2 days, one of my sisters called me with the phone number for the AARP Fraud Watch. It came on the magazine that comes out from AARP. I didn't get that magazine because my membership expired and I didn't have any money to renew. So I didn't get that. But she called me with this phone number. She called me. Yes, she did.
They're listening, Kate.
So is somebody else.
Yes.
And I called AARP and was transferred to a retired detective who had worked with fraud. They were the first kind words I heard. Now, my sisters were kind, but he was so helpful and said, "Of course it's a crime. You know, this is a felony. This is a lot of money." The last thing he said to me was, "That hammer you have in your hand, hitting yourself over the head with, it's time to put it down."
Wow.
And that meant more to me. I still talk about that because that comforted me more than I can say.
Wow.
And he asked me if I'd be willing to tell my story. And here we are.
Here we are. And this next part of the story is so powerful. Kate, in the summer of 2020, here you were struggling financially. I'm
Yes.
still assuming, correct?
Yes.
What happened during the minor heat wave?
I turned on my central air conditioning and it didn't work, didn't come on. And I didn't have any money to even call in somebody to look at it, you know. So I was using a portable air conditioner, the kind that you vent out the window. It has that like a dryer hose to it. So on the morning of July 16th, all of the dogs and I were in the living room sleeping.
Oh, I see. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Explain, well, we can see it, but what is it, Kate?
That's the front of my house. I had all these dogs and all the dog beds were in the living room, and I tried to put it out myself because I'm stubborn. But I knew at one point it was beyond me, and that's when the electricity went out. And it was 5 a.m, so it was dark, and then all the black smoke filled the room. And they say you get disoriented quickly, and believe me, I did. I couldn't even find my way out. I went out through that, out the front door. And the dogs had gone to the back of the house. But could we have the next one, please?
Oh,
None of the dogs made it out. None of them.
which one's Trixie?
The one with their tongue out.
Okay. Wow.
So the house burnt down. I lost every single thing I owned, every paper, every picture, everything that was left from my husband. I have no material memories left. All of the Christmas ornaments we collected over the years, everything was gone.
And so you were almost like, well, you were homeless at this
Yes.
point. Where did you move to?
Well, first I got moved to the hospital into the burn unit, and I was there a few days, and then I went to one of my sister's homes and stayed there for a little while. But then I went to a hotel for several months, one of those long-term kind of places. It was one room, but it had a refrigerator and a sink and a dishwasher, microwave. But it was one room. And I'm not one to be claustrophobic, but after 4 months of that, I was, ready to pull my hair out. And they wanted to put me into an apartment. And I said, if I'm moving and I've got nothing here to keep me, I want to go to Lancaster. And because I've always loved Lancaster. And during that time, my brother-in-law, God bless him, he asked to look at my homeowner's insurance. The house had belonged to my mother. That house was given to my great aunt and uncle on their wedding day in 1934. And then it went to my mom, and then it went to me. And I just put my name on her homeowner's policy. I didn't change it. I don't know anything about insurance. Well, I think that's part of a scam too. My mother got roped into paying for the best that they had. But thank God, because it really came to my aid. And 2 weeks ago, I moved into a new house. So life has gotten better.
And I hear you had a pretty special escort when you moved in 2 weeks ago. Is that correct?
Unbeknownst to me, there were little angels working in the background. And my sister and her husband were at my house. I was at the apartment still packing. And Mark Solomon, who usually speaks with Paul and I, he had made arrangements with me to come help me move stuff. And he arrived and he said, come on, let's go to the house. And I said, no, I still have a lot of packing to do. So he took everything that was boxed up and he said, I'm going to go, but come with me. And I'm like, no, I really need to stay here. Now, come on, I'll bring you right back. All right. So I said, I need to call my sister and tell her that, because she's going to be mad when I show up, that the packing isn't done and I abandoned ship. I should be there packing. And I called and I said, how are you? And she said, entertaining. I said, who are you entertaining? She said, well, there's 3 police cars in the driveway. There's about 15 people from AARP and the IAFCI, and they all came from all corners. Mark is in Connecticut,
Yes.
right? And he drove down. Kathy Stokes, who's head of the AARP fraud division, drove up from Washington. Somebody flew in from Chicago. I don't even know who
Yep,
that was.
right, yep.
And they brought a big bouquet of balloons, which were tied out front, and a cake and sodas and muffins and what have you. Now, I moved into a 55 and over community. And we took, I should have put that on the slide. We took a picture out on the front lawn, holding up a banner. And I want to tell you, almost every curtain up and down that street, there was somebody looking at. I have become a celebrity.
As you have, and New York Times have discovered
Yes.
Kate as well.
Yeah.
So, Kate, you're okay with some questions, right?
Yes.
I'd like to invite, now the one ground rule I always have with questions. Please make your questions short. Don't go into a narrative and a story, okay? And wait
Okay.
for Trudy with the microphone. Okay, so here we go. Thank you. We're not ready. Okay. Anybody,
have a question.
anybody in the room? Hold on 1 second.
Thank you. I was about to ask about the email that you received from the UN about transferring the money to buy the air ticket. Was that a UN address? Or?
It looks like it, but they are so good at what they do. And they know the IT system much better than any of us do and can create these things, and they look legitimate. So, I thought it was real.
Thank you. Rather than a question, I just want to express my gratitude to you. Expressing your story is so important, and your braveness. And and willingness to share your stories is really touching. I appreciate you. You're very brave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I was just wondering, was the law enforcement ever able to find out anything about these people?
Good question. Thank you.
Mm.
Kate,
Well, after I met Mark and Paul last summer, they took an interest in my case, and I don't know, I guess maybe I'm a little bit of a hoarder. I was an executive secretary, so I never got rid of email or anything. And I even had all of those gift cards that I sent over, but I lost them in the fire. I gave all my information to Mark, and he did a lot of legwork, which I was amazed at how much information he got. But it went so far, and they knew it was overseas, but I don't think they've gotten any further.
no, but Mark Solomon is a retired detective from Connecticut now working with another company, but he's got so many good connections, and we believe there is a Nigerian connection somewhere with a network of suspects. You never know because, and I found this in my own career, you think that a case is dormant or non-existent, and then suddenly a name cross refers to something else and it revives an old case. So you never know. We're not holding out great hope, but you never know. But the important thing is that that information has now been followed up, and it's very important to do that.
One thing, I'm sorry, just one second. One thing I forgot to say was when I was living in the hotel with nothing, Tony contacted me again. And I said, oh, I've had this fire. It's terrible. I lost all the dogs and going on and on and on. And he said, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I need $1,500. And I said, did you hear me? Did you listen to what I just said? I don't have any money. He said, oh, yes, you do. I said, no, I don't. He said, I know your friends started a GoFundMe page for you. And that sent the hair on the back of my neck standing straight up, because obviously he's keeping track. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, Kate, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Presentation, and I'm a fellow Philadelphian. So
Oh, nice, nice.
But I wanted to share with the group that how pervasive this fraud, scam, and romance is.
Mhm.
My husband and I watched the show. The Brits do a great job, thank you, on their movies and presentations. And the scammer attended a support group for people who had been scammed
Oh,
to
no.
further scam them and also to further get information on how to scam.
Oh,
So you really have to be careful of even attending a support group for scammers. And he further scammed the woman who had already been scammed with his kind way of letting her know that, you know, that he was in her corner. So
Wow.
be careful. Right.
That's the worst.
Do we have any scammers in the room? Oh, okay, just check in. We're saying there's a question at the back, Trudy.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I have two questions. One, did you only transfer money by purchasing the gift cards? And then my second question is, were you ever given instruction by the investigators, like if Tony were to contact you again to continue communication or to report it?
Well, to answer the first one, he did ask, I think for the airfare money, he asked for that to be in Bitcoin. And I had never even heard of Bitcoin at that point. I had no idea where to go, what to do, but he told me. And I'm sorry, the second question again.
Did they ever tell you, law enforcement, say what to say to him or what to do if he
Right.
contacted
sorry.
you?
Well, after I met Mark and Paul last summer and Mark started investigating, he said, as long as it doesn't hurt you, me, would you mind talking to him again? And so I did, and I could not identify his accent. But this one day, Tony apparently forgot that he had hit the call button, and there's all these people in the background because it was a boiler room, and they're all chatting in another language. So I took my phone, because this was coming over the computer, and I put it on video, and I held it up to the laptop, and I taped 18 minutes. In the state of Pennsylvania, both parties must agree to be recorded, so it's no good.
Were there any victim assistance program available to assist you with any of your losses as a senior in the scam?
No, see, I didn't know anything about where to go or who to report it to, or that there was any kind of help out there. So,
Until AARP Fraud Watch Network, right?
yes, yes, exactly.
Did anybody ever suggest putting a tap on your phone so they could trace the number that this person was calling from, unless it was?
Well, he was doing this through that app that is untraceable, so that wouldn't work.
Trudy?
Up here.
These detectives, were they able to find out if he really looked like that, or these were stolen photos?
Well,
or-
I can actually answer that because he's still calling through this, thing on the computer and saying he loves me and he still wants to get married, and please just forget about what happened, but he finally told me that he would do a face-to-face call, which shocked me. And we did, and he's a 55-year-old Black Nigerian man. Not the guy that was up there on the pictures. That is a plastic surgeon from South America, a very successful person. That's why there's so many pictures of that guy out there. And so Tony would send me, I didn't have them up there, he would send pictures of that man and the two children, the boy and the girl. So,
Oh, yes, carry on, then we'll go to the remote to see if we have any questions.
I'm sorry, I would like to
That's
add
all
for
right.
anyone here, you can Google photos and find out if they're online.
but I didn't know how to do that
know,
at the
but-
time.
Yeah, you know now.
I
Yeah, that's
had to
right.
find a younger person who would help me
Yeah.
with that,
Do we have some questions online?
Yeah, I'm going to come back over there.
Okay.
Kate, I happen to know that in addition to everything that you've been through, you are also paying it forward. Can you tell us a little bit about AARP's REST program, the Victim Support Program?
Yes, and I'm sure Liz could do a much better job with that than I can. I've actually been involved with a lot of people. I did volunteer to be on the REST program. It's a support group for people who have been scammed or their loved ones who are worried about that. And it's a wonderful, wonderful setup. I don't know the number offhand, but I'm sure we can get it for you, but that's wonderful. But I think this is a good time to bring up that I've been interviewed by more people, newspapers. I've been interviewed by TV people from across the country. And within the last 3 weeks, 2 different young men have gone to great lengths, and they're not related or know each other, to find me, either through the TV station and asking the interviewer to get in touch with me and what have you. Both their mothers have been in romance scams, and both of them are suicidal. Now, right away, I said, I am not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I can't, if they're really on the edge, you need to get them help. But if they want to talk to someone, I'd be happy to do that. And I've spent time with the 2 sons as well, because they're both upset. So I've put in, I don't know how many hours, but one of the ladies sent me flowers after I talked to her. So I think it's making a little bit of difference to be able to talk to somebody one-on-one like that and listen to them without any judgment.
The AARP REST program is a virtual online support program, and you can get more information on that by going to aarp.org/fraud, and that will direct you into
Yes.
that virtual online support program, the REST program.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've got some questions in the virtual world.
Hi, Kate or Paul. Does law enforcement know where a majority of these criminal scam cells operate from? Are they outside of the US, local, or just everywhere?
Maybe I can answer that. Just from my experience, we'll hear from the FBI after the break too, which is going to be fascinating. They're everywhere. But the good news is that we're learning more sophisticated methods on how to identify those that are operating overseas. And I got to give a shout out to the US Attorney's Office around the country, because when I started prosecuting these cases in '96, nobody was doing anything about it. But now we've learned a lot more. And through collaboration, there's much more success in extraditing some of these suspects from all over the world. And we've had some successful prosecutions.
Sorry, first off, my name is Sarah, and I just want to commend you, Kate. I'm sorry this happened to you. You're very brave, and I'm sure you made a difference to everyone in this room, but you especially made a difference to me. Now, for those of you who can see me, I'm young. I'm very young. I'm 43, and I almost fell victim to what you did the same time you did. Thank God for my parents being the suspicious people that they are. So I wasn't, but just sitting here, I said to Trudy and to Amber, oh my God. So I just wanted to commend you and say that. And then I also wanted to ask you, how come law enforcement at first can be so like, well, it's not our problem? I mean, that really bothers me.
We're doing a great deal to try and turn that around. Not only that it is their problem, they need to at least take a report, but to change their thinking that how stupid are you? You know, it's not the victim's fault. These people get you under their ether. That's what AARP calls it. And you're very trusting. You know, earlier Chap said something about trust the person you're dealing with. Well, after a little while, I trusted Tony. I thought he was coming here to marry me. You know, so it's when you say I would never fall for it. I said that too.
Hi, my name is Gerarda Cullifer, and I also applaud you for sharing the story. My question or my thought is, this implicates everybody in our community. I don't care what age you are. You're either a preventative victim or you're a trust resource. So to all the young people in our lives, share these stories with the younger generation, because I'm the niece. I'm the daughter to my mother. I'm the friend of, I'm a contemporary to their second generation down. So if I get pinged as a trust resource, this information is my arsenal to help all of my sphere. So everybody listening, no, this is not an age specific thing.
No, it's not.
We're all in it together. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Last Friday evening, I was asked to speak to a government official from Malaysia, which was fascinating, just fascinating. And she's here in the States learning about fraud because they are putting the internet across the country of Malaysia. They're about 97% finished, but the more they get out there, the more scams that are coming in. And in that country, the greatest number of victims fall between the age of 13 and 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
there was a lady.
One more? Okay, great. Just one more and then.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm sorry you went through this.
Thank you.
Many of us in the room are, as was just pointed out, the next generation. We touch other people. What can we or others say in the face of talking with the victim of something like this that makes a difference? The difference between you who are moving forward and some of the other people that you have met and spoken with who are struggling.
Right.
What can we say that helps that journey for you?
I have said to the two women, especially, that this is not your fault. You have been assaulted just as if someone came up and punched you or stabbed you. This is an assault to your very soul, and it's not your fault. You know, you have to say that 100 times before the person will believe it. But keeping the judgment out, which is very difficult for anybody, trying to understand what happened, but trying to convince the person that it is a scam is also very difficult. If they've developed feelings for this person or they're lonely, the loneliness skyrocketed during the pandemic, and people were inside and have developed friendships online. So, you know, that's, I think, part of the reason why there's so many more scams now. But to have, if the person could trust a younger person, a grandson or granddaughter, to help them try and track this person, do the facial recognition, what have you, close up the parameters on their Facebook account, you know, which I had someone do for me, and not be afraid to ask for that help. Maybe their adult children don't have to know. Maybe they go right to the grandchild and ask for help, you know. It's a hard one to get past, you know, because it breaks your heart. Losing the money was devastating, but losing that relationship broke my heart. I cried for a long time after that.
Let's just say it out loud. You have enough friends. You do not need to become friends with strangers on the internet, okay? You are enough. You have enough friends. Paul, let's come back to you.
Great. Well, can you just join me in thanking Kate again for her story? Thank you so much, Kate. Appreciate it. Before the break, I'm just going to spend 10 minutes, if you don't mind, sharing some other tips that I've learned over the years of prosecuting these kinds of cases. Mike, I might need your help here, if you wouldn't mind, because, and I'll do this very quickly, but over the years, I've built up a series of tips. I used to start with my top 10 tips based upon David Letterman, but since then it's gone to like 18, but I won't get through all those today. But I just want to be able to share with you some of these lessons that I've learned. And I really think, thank you so much, Mike. One of the reasons I love doing these presentations, particularly with someone like Kate, is we're putting the spotlight, focus on the crime, not on the victim, but on the crime itself and on the perpetrator. And I always ask this question, who needs to be involved? And this lady said it well over here, all of us. It takes all of us to be part of the solution. It takes you and me. And what you've heard today, you can pass that on to others in your community and in your homes. I love this slide from Hawaii, because when we work together, we move forward, we make progress. We collaborate together, AARP, Board of Supervisors, police officers, FBI, postal inspectors, APS, prosecutors. And this is my former office. I'm so proud to be associated with them. And during my 22 years as a lead prosecutor trying to protect the older adults, this was my biggest problem. How do I break through the barrier of silence? You know, Canada has called it, well, they said it thrives on silence. Predators rely on people not saying anything. The Attorney General for Kansas has called elder abuse the silent epidemic of our time. So you understand the problem we have here, overcoming this embarrassment, this fear of telling our story. 65% of all the cases that I prosecuted involve some form of fraud. And, you know, it's interesting, even the CDC has now called the elder exploitation a public health concern. Kate mentioned 2 ladies she recently spoke to or was talked to about who are on the verge of thinking suicidal thoughts. That's what happens to a lot of victims. So here's a few of the tips before our break. Choose a caregiver with great caution. Never hire through a newspaper. Don't ever hire through Craigslist. The first 2 letters of Craigslist are CR. The first 2 letters of Crook are CR. That is no coincidence, I promise you, okay? And always let your financial institution know when there's a change in circumstances that there's a caregiver coming into the home. Let them know so they can keep a special eye on your loved one's accounts for any unusual activities. Ask the agency to show you what background checks they have done when you're considering hiring a caregiver through an agency. Don't rely on F references. And I've even said, consider hiring a private investigator. Why are so many of the defendants that I prosecuted caregivers? Well, you think about it. What is there in the home that can be taken? Jewelry, coins, cash, easily converted into cash. The defendants that I prosecuted thought that the victim wouldn't find out or that they, quote, wouldn't press charges. And they always have a reason for taking the money. I was owed overtime or whatever. See this lady in the middle? She killed the gentleman on the left after stealing almost $600,000 of his money. We've never found out where she murdered him, how she murdered him, but we know she did. We couldn't produce a body for the jury, but the jury convicted her of first-degree murder. This gentleman on the left, Jack Parks, hired a caregiver after his wife died through a newspaper, and she then ended up killing him. I prosecuted her for murder. This gentleman was a true hero, a Pearl Harbor survivor, and he was exploited by his caregiver, isolated. Thankfully, neighbors got suspicious and called for APS, Adult Protective Services, to do a welfare check, and they brought in a deputy sheriff who broke down the door to find the gentleman laying in filth in his kitchen. How did she get away with it? She isolated him by putting up notices like this on the windows. Don't come near, don't bother us. Why? Because she was stealing all his money. We found this cash in the back bedroom where she was living. One of the very first defendants I prosecuted was a caregiver who had been a professional thief out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And she came to San Diego, and the agency unfortunately did not do a background check on her, didn't know she was a parolee. Tip number 2, the first item that is stolen is jewelry. And I always say, please keep all your jewelry locked up. Keep an inventory of all your jewelry. Photograph it, video it. You see all these ladies, these were all my victims in a courtroom one day. They were all victimized by the same defendant. He was the maintenance guy in their assisted living facility. And whenever they had a problem with a dripping faucet or a broken TV, he would come in and tell them, why don't you go downstairs and have a cup of coffee while I fix the problem? Well, he would repair the problem, but he would also steal their jewelry. We need to shred everything that contains any information about ourselves, right? We shred it. Crisscross is best. But just don't shred with a tie on, okay? That's dangerous, okay? Never do it with a tie. Why do we shred everything? Because there are dumpster divers living in Fairfax County. Did you know that? Yeah, they're everywhere. They sift through our trash. Please protect your incoming and outgoing mail. If you have an unlocked mailbox, the chances are very high that some of your mail will be stolen today. And so I always say, get a locked mailbox, or if you can't, get a PO box. And with checkbooks, and some of you are saying, what's a check? I know, but there is such a thing called a checkbook. And if you order a new checkbook, do me a favor. Tell your bank or credit union, only put my first initial and my last name on the checks. Nothing else. No address, no phone number, no nothing. And then always ask to pick up your checkbook from the bank or the credit union. Don't rely on in transit, because it could be stolen in transit. Please do a credit search on yourselves at least 2 or 3 times a year, going through Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. You can go online and do an annualcreditreport.com search on yourself. It's safe. I've done it. And it's a good way of checking to see if anyone has obtained a credit card in your name without you knowing. And if you're not going to be applying for a loan or a mortgage, then consider freezing your credit, because that is one good way of at least reducing the risk of becoming a victim of identity theft. This is and I can give you some of this information later. Tip number 6, obviously caller ID, but it's not foolproof, because the criminals know how to spoof Fairfax Police Department's phone number. So you may think you're getting a phone call from Fairfax Police. No, it's probably from a scammer. Please don't be afraid to hang up. If you don't recognize the number, let it go to message. But why are we so curious? Why do we always want to answer the phone when it rings? Try to let it go to message. And remember, they can mimic real phone numbers. I like this one. Keep a whistle by the phone. And when you get that annoying extended warranty for your car phone call at dinner time, just blow the whistle down the phone, will you? 2 things. It gives you good exercise for your diaphragm, but secondly, it gives him an earache. And you're going to get robocalls on your cell phone all day long. And one way that I reduce that is by, I pay for it, but it's worth it. You get an app on your phone. Mine is called RoboKiller. I like it. It blocks a lot of scam calls. This is going to ruin your Saturday morning. You'll never win the foreign lottery. Oh, I'm so sorry, but you won't. I promise you, you will never get that silver Mercedes in your driveway. But unfortunately, I had several victims in San Diego who lost a lot of money to that. I even had a retired Catholic priest who was the victim of the Publishers Clearinghouse. $41,000 he lost, but we traced it to South Carolina. This is the crook. And we found him and we extradited him back from the East Coast. And there he is. What a charming young man he was. And then get a look at this, the IRS. They send you a letter. But how do you know it's a fake? Because crooks do not know how to spell. Do you see it? Yes, the IRS doesn't have a lottery department. They have a lottery department. See the third line down? Lottery. That's a big giveaway. How do you know that this is a scam? It comes from Chicago. Oh, that's a good one. Are you from Chicago? Okay. But look to the right. The last time I checked, Chicago had not been overrun by Parisians. Okay, French. This came from Montreal, Quebec. Okay. And inside the envelope was a letter congratulating my victim that she become the millionaire. And inside the letter was a check. Would you ever trust a check from virtual Las Vegas? I hope not, but she did, and she cashed it, and she withdrew $3,700 to pay for, quote, the taxes. Thankfully, I was able to get the bank to reimburse her, but it took a struggle. You've heard this already, the IRS will never call you. But just in case you didn't hear that, they will never call you. And just in case you didn't hear that, they will never call you, okay? And then you've heard this one, the grandson will never be calling you from jail. But as I always tell people, if there's two things, your grandson will never call you from jail, but if he does, let him stay there, okay? So there's the grandma scam, and they're now asking for iTunes gift cards or Target gift cards. And now guess what? We have artificial intelligence to combat. And now we're getting scammers actually mimicking the grandson's real voice. And that is proving to be a real challenge. And the final one is the one that Kate has been telling us about. Don't look for love in all the wrong places. But careful of this. Some victims become mules, money mules, by helping the crook transfer the money to other people. Despite warnings, they still do it. So we need to warn victims that they could end up becoming defendants. This lady, 81 years of age, Glenda Syme, last year became a convicted felon because she was a money mule who fell in love, just like Kate did, and wouldn't believe anybody that was warning her. And she kept sending money. And eventually the US Attorney's Office had to prosecute her for being a conduit. And she's now on a 5-year felony probation. My time is up. My mother always said to me, don't ever go over your time, so I won't. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Trudy. Thank you so much.
And we are now going to do a 15-minute stretch break because I see some of you are wiggling around in your chairs, and I'm sure you're wiggling around at home as well. So we will be back at 11 o'clock. Kate and Paul will be back with us. They will be joined by individuals from the FBI, United States Postal Service, Fairfax County Police, Fairfax County Area on Aging. So please come back and join us for part 2, but let's get a little bit of a break in. Oh, do you want to get in contact with Paul? No. Yes. I'm registering for this program.
Our story begins more than 60 years ago inside an abandoned chicken coop, where our founder discovered a retired teacher living, no home, no health care. So she said no to this injustice and yes to transforming lives. It's this drive, this compassion that inspired AARP. Today, we empower people to choose how they live as they age. As a wise friend and fierce defender, we advocate for better health, financial security, and stronger communities. AARP, join us in making a difference.
There's nothing quite like local. So at AARP, we connect people to what matters most in the places they call home. We're here to help your money, health, and happiness live longer. Connect with us at aarp.org/local.
I matched with this cutie on a dating site. We texted all the time, but never met up. Then he asked to send him gift cards for a plane ticket to see me. And that's when I remembered a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Gift cards? This is a romance scam. Spent that money on self-care instead.
Recognize fraud sooner so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
I was doing some shopping and got a pop-up on my laptop. Computer had a virus. So I called the number on the page and the guy on the phone wants to take control of my screen to sort it out. Then I remember a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Control my screen. This is a tech support scam. Thankfully, my order still went through.
Recognize fraud sooner so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Testing.
So, I'm playing with the dog, and I get this robocall from the Social Security Administration saying my card had been suspended and I had to call them back immediately. And that's when I remembered a tip from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Random robocall? This is a Social Security scam.
Recognize fraud sooner
Robots.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP. The moment you realize you're ready for what's next in your career, that's when we start planning it together. Let's start planning earlier for a career that lives longer.
Okay. All is here. Kate's here. We are all in our places. We are all back in our places, and hopefully the folks here in the room got a stretch break and our folks at home got a stretch break as well. So welcome back to part 2 of our program. Just a quick reminder, we are recording today's program, and a link to that recording will be in a follow-up email. So let's go to part 2. On our panel today, which is going to be led by Paul Greenwood. Even though I'm a human resource professional, as a prosecutor, you are a much better interviewer. So on our panel today is Jamie Daly, Special Agent, FBI, Washington Field Office, and a certified fraud examiner. Next to Jamie is Officer Kyle Woodward with Fairfax County Police. A frequent flyer to our Scam Jam program is Ray Campbell, U.S. Postal Inspector, Fraud, Cyber Investigations with the United States Postal Service. Eraina Hill, Fairfax County, Office of Adult Protective Services. And we welcome back Kleinert. And Paul, I will give the program back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Trudy. And I must say, it really is impressive on a Saturday morning to get such a lineup of diverse agencies with us. Oh, do I have permission to step away from the camera or not? Oh, do I? Okay. Thank you. Because I want to see our good folks here. But what I've asked them to do, first of all, is give you a snapshot into their lives of being professionals. What do they do? And then I may follow up with some questions, but then I want to invite those of you who are streaming online to, again, in the chat box, put your questions in for these good folks. And if it's something they can't answer, they'll tell you they can't answer it. But if they can, they will be more than happy to do so. So let's just go down the line and start with Jamie from the FBI.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Jamie Daly. I'm a special agent with the FBI. I'm assigned to our Washington field office, and I work here locally in Manassas. I work mainly financial crimes. I like to focus on investment fraud. That's sort of my specialty. I'm also the Washington field office's elder fraud coordinator. So I get a lot of referrals for elder fraud, and I come do a lot of presentations like this on fraud awareness.
How long have you been with the FBI?
Apologies. Yes, I've been with the FBI for 7.5 years. I've been an agent the whole time, and I've been assigned to the same squad the whole time. So 7.5 years of working fraud investigations.
What does it take to become an FBI agent?
Ooh, well, it takes a lot. So I have a background in accounting. So I'm also a certified public accountant, in addition to a certified fraud examiner. So I had a background in accounting and various finance related jobs. They do require a minimum of bachelor's degree and 3 years of work experience, although I think that is changing, a fitness test, a polygraph, a background investigation. So a lot of that just to even get hired. And then a good 5 months at the academy of doing all kinds of things, learning how to interview, learning defensive tactics, how to shoot a gun, all sorts of things that we get to do at the academy.
And final question.
Yes.
What led you to say to yourself one day, I want to become an FBI agent? What was it about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was a bank teller. That was my first, what I consider my first professional job. And I was very young, very new as a bank teller, and I got robbed. So someone came into the bank and they chose me as the victim, and I got robbed. And that was actually my first introduction to the FBI. I had no idea that the FBI even cared about that or showed up to that. But here came an FBI agent to my bank when I was 18, 19 years old. And I just thought it was so interesting. And I ended up catching a lot of fraud as a teller, a lot of counterfeit checks and just various fraud. And it piqued my interest. So that's sort of how I chose my education. And then that was my goal.
See, that's why I love asking questions, because you never know what answer you're going to get. That was amazing. Thank you so much. Kyle, over to you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kyle Woodward. I'm with the Fairfax County Police Department. I've been with the department for almost 16 years. Master police officer with the department. I've been assigned to a variety of positions. Was assigned to our financial crimes section for 3 years in our major crimes bureau. I've been a criminal investigations section detective, a criminal investigations division detective, and a domestic violence detective. And I'm currently assigned to the Fairfax station.
And in the last couple of years, you've got another qualification, haven't you?
Oh, yes, sir. I'm also a certified fraud examiner.
What is a certified, because we just heard from your colleague here that she's also, well, what is a certified fraud examiner, Carl?
So it's a professional certification through the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. What I was able to do is take a course and then a multi-part test to show that your knowledge and expertise in the field.
So are you able to basically follow the money? Is that what you're certified to do? The certification that's part of, I think that's part of showing your expertise in doing those kind of skill sets. And what kind of cases do you investigate?
So I've investigated a variety of cases, everything from identity theft, credit card, elder fraud, investment fraud, romance scams. If you name it, I've probably had at least one case with it.
Do you see, and this is my final question for now, but is there a spike in a certain type of crime that you're seeing over the last year or so that is more predominant?
Over the last couple, since 2020, in my opinion, the identity theft and the COVID fraud cases were very prominent.
Thank you so much. Eraina, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Eraina from Adult Protective Services. Can you talk us about what do you do?
Sure. Good morning again, everybody. My name is Eraina Hill with the Fairfax County Department of Family Services, and I work with the Adult Protective Services Unit. So for Adult Protective Services, essentially, we investigate cases that come in that involve neglect, exploitation, and abuse of individuals age 60 and older, or individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities. I also serve as the financial exploitation coordinator, and what that means is I run a task force that includes partnership with the FBI, banks, local law enforcement, other APS partners, and we staff cases that involve financial exploitation.
And is this a county position? Are you with Fairfax County?
Yes.
And I always ask this question whenever I go, how many Adult Protective Service caseworkers do you have in Fairfax County?
So in Fairfax, I believe there is somewhere between 20 and 30 Adult Protective Services workers.
And somebody told me this morning there's a population of around 1 million people in Fairfax County. Is that correct? The other question I always have is, okay, between 20 and 30 caseworkers for APS, how many, if you know, approximately people work for Child Protective Services in Fairfax County?
A lot more than Adult Protective Services.
And the reason I ask you that is, and I'm not asking you to comment on this because I understand some of the limitations you have, but I don't have those limitations. But do you realize that within the next 12 years, there'll be more people in this country over the age of 65 than children under the age of 18? So what does that tell you? Do we not need to fund Adult Protective Services with the kind of resources that they need? Would it be fair to say, and again, I don't want to get you into hot water, but your caseload is pretty high, isn't it?
Yes.
Approximately how many cases are you dealing with on any given basis?
So I would say, just speaking specifically to me, I believe right now my caseload is about 13 individuals.
And is there a time limit when you can keep those cases open at a point where you have to close them?
So typically, because we're doing the investigations, they should be closed or opened for services within 45 days.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ray from the Postal Inspectors.
Yes, good morning. Name's Ray Campbell. If you've been here for previously, you probably remember me. I'm the postal inspector that doesn't go away, but I am still here. First thing I need to tell you is what a postal inspector does, but I'll mention that in a moment. So I have 19 years in federal law enforcement. I've always worked in white collar. I've actually spent the last 11 working fraud here in Northern Virginia. My office is actually at the Merrifield Post Office. So if you've ever gone there, I'm actually quite nearby, and feel free to stop in if you want, if you have questions or whatever. We're always happy to help, and we do take walk-ins. But wanted to tell you what a postal inspector was particularly. You might have asked that question, but our job is we're just a law enforcement arm of the U.S. Postal Service. So we are employees of the U.S. Postal Service. So we investigate all fraud. We protect the mail, and more importantly, we protect the customers of the U.S. Postal Service, which is everybody. So one thing, however, we do is we work all types of fraud, not just those directly affecting the mail. We work all sorts of phone scams, investment frauds, romance, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly, but we work everything. So feel free to reach out to us if you guys have any issues or questions.
And isn't it true, Ray, that you actually have colleagues in the postal inspectors who are actually based in other jurisdictions overseas?
Yes, we have inspectors actually all over the country. So we have a lot of global security. A lot of our partners do work overseas, other agencies as well. Fortunately, it may not be a surprise to learn that a lot of the masterminds of scams live outside the United States. So we're often having to call for assistance at various countries.
Thank you. Kate, I was going to ask you, had you ever heard of people like Adult Protective Services before you entered into this experience you had?
I was so young back then, I don't think I remember anything about it.
Like in 2020, Kate. Come on, but let's get real here. Had you even heard of them or even thought that they could actually assist with your situation?
No, not at all. I thought adult protective services were for people being physically abused by their caregiver or something like that. Not
Okay.
that they would have anything to do with what I went through.
And had you even heard of people like the postal inspectors before?
Yes.
Okay. Did you even think about contacting them?
No.
What about the FBI?
I did. Did you want to bring that up?
Well, sure. I think Jamie would love to hear. What happened?
Well, let me first say that my full name is Kathleen Mary Riley Kleinert. So I have had the luck of the Irish all my life. I called the FBI. They took my information. They were very nice and about it. It was the morning of January 6th.
Oh, okay. That January the 6th.
January the 6th. And they got busy later in the day. So.
Oh, gosh.
So I just thought I was 3 for 3, local police, state police, FBI. No, they had a lot to do, and my case was not nearly that important. So.
Okay. Okay. Well, there we go. Yeah. Thank you. Before I ask any other question, I don't want to hog the microphone. Does any of you right now have a burning question that you'd like to put to one of these great professionals that we have with us today? Okay. So shall I? Okay. Thanks, Trudy. And if you can identify the person that you'd like to ask the question, and if it's a general question, I'm going to ask the others to chime in.
Hi, this is for the postal inspector. When I was growing up, there was a phrase that says, "Postal inspector always gets their man." Is it still true?
What year was this? I think I've seen that poster in some of my older offices, but I would like to think so, and it's certainly not from lack of trying. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of our scammers are overseas. It's difficult sometimes to track down the actual mastermind. Sometimes we only get sort of the lower level individuals that are here in the United States. We do our best we can. A lot of fugitives cases that we have, we work with other countries, other jurisdictions. We work towards extradition along with the FBI and Department of Justice. I have 3 outstanding extradition requests to 3 different countries right now for fraud scams that are perpetrated here at Novo. So we'll keep trying, but we're doing the best we can.
And with those extradition requests that you have with some countries, are you finding that more countries are more receptive to responding to your requests for extradition?
I think overall, yes. I think financial crime, I think at this point has spread the globe. I think other prosecutors in other countries recognize the dangers of fraud, and having individuals in their backyards committing frauds to the US and other countries actually injures their relationships with other countries. So through diplomatic means, through the State Department, they actually do a lot of outreach to other countries to try to express how important it is to fight financial crime and to help us extradite them to the US.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay, sometimes over the computer, somebody tries to get in your computer when you try to install some kind of software and everything, and they freeze the screen. And then they start to make you think, well, it's the end of the world. And if you don't do something, then you'll lose your computer and all the whole thing. Okay, what happens? Because they say, well, you're really endangered and everything like that. Yeah, I could die tomorrow too. I hang up and everything. What I did to get my computer going again, I removed the battery and I put it back in there, and then it went back to normal. But what would happen if I didn't remove the battery and continue to use my computer?
Okay, well, why don't we start? I'm sure each of you got something to add. Jamie, would you want to start? And then we'll go down the line to see.
Yeah, so I mean, from our perspective, what would happen? I think that's a very technical question that I don't have the answer to. I don't know if one of you does, but that's something that probably our cyber folks would be more equipped to answer. I'm not a cyber expert, I'm a financial expert. But that's something that, I would, if it's like a technical related question, you would probably want to go to a store. Well, yes. So yeah, as far as sending money, absolutely not. That's the Indian accent. Yes. So we do have a big case right now that's an Indian call center. So as far as cooperation, India actually has been fairly cooperative with us, and we are sending a lot of, even if we cannot charge those individuals here in the United States, we've actually established a good relationship with India right now where we're referring a lot of information to them, and the Indian officials over there are actually arresting people over in India and charging them over there. I know that's not your question, but yeah, as far as technical stuff goes, definitely just, I think what you did is great. Yes, yeah. Then as to what Ray said, a lot of these individuals who are perpetrating these crimes, they are overseas. So that is a red flag that you picked up on, of course, is the accent. So that is a lot of the crime is starting overseas. Yes.
Thanks. Carl, did you want to add anything before I go to Ray? Okay, Ray.
Okay. Actually, I work cybercrime as well.
All right. He is your expert.
I don't want to hog the mic. I mean, come on now. Yeah, that's a tech support scam. It's very common. It's been going on for quite some time. My grandparents have had it. I know plenty of other people have had it. How you get it, there's a million different ways that things get installed on your computer, and it tells you to call this 1-800 number or whatever it is, a Microsoft representative or whatever it might be. I've gotten them to. I understand what that is. It is possible that if they've managed to install something so malicious that you cannot access your computer again, the only thing I can recommend is to unplug it, as you said you did, which is good. Maybe pulling the plug is probably the safest bet, at least to preserve whatever information might be on it. If they have gone that far and they have installed something, they now have access to everything, potentially have access to everything on your computer. So the only way to stop that would be to pull the power, not just from the internet, because you don't necessarily know if you're still connected. So my recommendation would be to pull the power. Now, in terms of fixing that, there's lots of legitimate tech support places. Best Buy, I can think of them, Micro Center, which is here in Fairfax. They're good. I usually refer people to those. They can get your computer back up and running. It will probably cost maybe $100 or so, but unfortunately, it's the only real resolution that I could offer. But obviously, when that happens to you and you get a pop-up like that, I mean, I can sit here and tell you it's always a scam, because it is. It's up to you, and I hope you tell others and pass the message along that this is a very common scam. And as mentioned, tech support, unfortunately, has occurred primarily from India. And so we have been working with Indian law enforcement along with the FBI. The reason being is a lot of American legitimate call centers are also in India. So a lot of the same people, they have learned how to speak to Americans, and they understand and sometimes can speak enough that you will believe that you may be even talking to someone in the country, whatever it may be. I would go as far as say don't talk to anyone with an accent, but I can tell you.
Oh, good.
I'm not saying that. Just be skeptical. Obviously, never. If you get a pop-up, never ever call that number. It is not Microsoft. I promise you that. If you really feel you need to call Microsoft, go on your phone, search for Microsoft headquarters, find the legitimate number, their 800 number, and go that route. But never ever trust anything that pops up on your screen.
Okay, Paul, if you'd let me get two questions. I've got one real and one virtual. Okay.
This is for the postal inspector. I am terrified to mail a check these days. Besides using a gel pen, and I don't even feel great about that, can you address this issue, and is there a solution?
I really feel bad about continuously answering the questions. I'll go answer your question, but if you guys please chime in, all right? So yes, mail theft is very active in our area too. It's rampant. The blue boxes are dangerous to put any sort of financial information in. We have mail carriers or postal carriers. They're getting robbed for their keys, not for their money, not for their phone, for the key. So understand this, it's a big dollar gain. And unfortunately, there are keys floating around. We work with the county to identify what our keys look like. But the bottom line is, even if somebody wants to get into a mailbox, they will get into the mailbox, even if it requires physical force. So while we want you to use the US mail, the safest recommendation I could have is if you are mailing a check or you're providing some sort of personal information, you take it to the post office and drop it inside the post office. That I'm not actually even saying the outside box, because we have criminals that break in after hours, 9, 10, after midnight, roaming blue boxes and trying to break into them, or they have fishing hooks. They have everything you could imagine to pull mail out. However, they cannot get inside the post office. So that would be my recommendation. It's unfortunate that you have to do that. I mean, we would like it to be safe for you to put it in your mailbox and put the little flag up, but unfortunately, it's no longer safe.
And Ray, you mentioned about postal carriers actually being robbed for the key that they contain. This is happening what, in broad daylight while they're on duty?
All of them happen during broad daylight. All of them are on duty. So the post office collects these keys at the end of every shift. They have to be accounted for. That's how valuable they are. So they have no choice. The bad guys have no choice but to rob them while they're on their routes. And it's unfortunate, but it happens very frequently. Our teams stay very busy, including right here in Northern Virginia. We probably have at least maybe one a month. And that would affect an entire zip code potentially. So those keys open up not just one box, but a lot of boxes.
And I'm assuming that's a federal crime then, because if it's attacking a postal employee, that makes it a federal?
Absolutely. So one of the things, I only mentioned fraud, but we protect our postal employees too. Any violent crime against a postal employee is a federal offense. We would take lead in that investigation. We have a specific team. I'm not part of it. I don't work violent crimes. We have violent crime experts who work those cases. Wow. We actually even have a homicide investigation here in the DC metro area from a mail carrier that was murdered maybe 6-7 years ago that is still active today.
Wow, amazing. Okay, remotely.
Hi, this is for any of you. Please discuss grooming by predators, and please address check washing.
Okay, grooming by a predator. Who would like to take a stab at that? Okay,
sure, I can
Eraina.
speak about grooming. So for those of you all who listened to Kate's story earlier, that is a prime example of how she was essentially groomed. It also kind of depends on what the method of the scam is that somebody may groom you. So again, like a romance scam, it's looking at that social media on occasion to see, oh, they're widowed, they have children, this is what they like to do, this is where they travel, and making those observations and gaining an interest or having the interest gained in that person to then be able to obtain what it is that they're looking to receive out of that relationship. Somebody want to talk about?
Anyone else?
Or add to that?
Jamie?
I'm just going to add to something you said, because something that we're seeing a lot of lately are impersonation, like TV impersonations or celebrity impersonations. So the bad guys are going on your social media and seeing who you like, who you follow, that sort of thing. They're creating these profiles that appear to be those people. So, you know, whoever it is, let's say you follow some celebrity. Well, they're creating a profile as that celebrity, reaching out to you, pretending to be that celebrity with some sort of investment opportunity or something. And it sounds crazy, but this is happening. And people are believing that the celebrity is really contacting them. And it even gets more sophisticated in that somebody that has a program, like we've seen some news anchors have investment programs that they do on the side. Well, you might already be invested in that program with that person legitimately. And then we're seeing these impersonation accounts reach out to you, pretending to be that person saying, hey, I know you're in my program. I have this other opportunity that I'm reaching out to people for. Here's how you invest in it. And we're seeing people get scammed that way. So that's kind of I guess, a variation of grooming.
Amazing. Okay, check washing. Kyle, do you know about check washing, certified fraud examiner? Good.
So check washing, if you're not familiar with it, obviously is, so check is usually stolen somewhere from either the mailbox outside of your home, or as he said, from the blue box, using a variety of available chemicals, you can wipe off the ink, and then proceed to change the name, the amounts, anything you want on the check. One thing I have heard in a conference last summer was that gel pens are more effective than the traditional ink pen in combating that. So they will change they will wipe off the payee. They will change it to themselves or to somebody else. And then they can also change the amount and then essentially just negotiate it at the bank as their own.
And that's one of the reasons why I suggested in one of my tips, when you order your next box of checks, only put your first initial and your last name, so they are guessing as to how you sign your name on the check. Ray, do you want to, before we take another question or comment, Ray, can you follow up on anything?
Sure. Yes. Check washing, a lot of it is stolen from the mail. A lot of times they are check boxes that may be going to a resident. Actually, the majority are people mailing checks that are getting intercepted either in the blue box, in the neighborhoods. That's usually where they're located, where they originate from. So there's all sorts of different methods. There's no perfect way to protect your account numbers. We can do everything and be as safe as we want, but our information could always get out there. So the best thing I could tell you, one is always go into the post office to mail a check. That would be my first recommendation. Next, I would try to prevent as much ordering of checks, trying to be careful. If you can do electronic check, and I'm probably gonna get fired from Postal Service for even recommending you do electronic checks. But
can you explain to some of us, what is an electronic check?
Well, that's you go onto your bank account online and you can submit a check. It basically works very similar to a wire. We all have probably seen free bill pay type activity. Your banks offer that. That obviously would avoid the mail completely. But again, even if you didn't use the mail at all, your information could still be put on a check. Checks can be counterfeited fairly easily. Honestly, yes, check washing is common, but it's not the only way. Certainly business accounts, but also personal accounts. The biggest thing you all have is that your bank will be responsible. You need to check your monthly statements. You need to pay attention to that statement that comes in every month, and make sure you know what you sent out that month and what you didn't send out. And if you find something on there that you don't recognize, call the bank. The bank will be responsible if fraud was committed in your name. So that's the first thing I would recommend you doing immediately, because you don't know necessarily even how the fraud occurred when you first find out somebody has used your name. My mother fell victim just a month ago. She had a $600 charge. Somebody had bought something in Walmart in her name. And of course she called me first, which makes sense. But I said, you need to call the bank. Actually, they're the ones that get your money back. So make sure you're reporting it and you're paying attention. If you pay attention, you'll most likely be able to fix the problem.
Thank you. Same way that you gave the recommendation about the check, the initial and the last name, what will be recommendations for social media? Because I have seen people that they share where are they from, birthdays, of course, the travel that they're going to.
Pictures of their vacation while they're on the vacation.
I think that's a great question for all of the panelists. So let's start with the FBI and then we'll work our way down and include Kate in that as well.
So yeah, certainly less is more. I'm just say don't use it at all. That's one option. I know that's hard, but it's a great thing. It really is. It's a great way for us to stay connected with our family and friends who are maybe not near us, but it's also become a tool used by criminals more and more and more. And I think every case that I have, there's some aspect of social media. So, I mean, the less you can share, better. You can set your accounts to private. I don't have all the different social media, but I know there are ways to go in and set things to private. So only your friends can see it. Only the people that you're connected with can see it. So, I mean, I'll pass it on, but really just try to put the least amount as possible on there.
Thank you, Carl.
Certainly, I like the idea, the less is more. Social media does have a strong tie to many of these cases. As you said, you share where you're on vacation, your home's susceptible to burglary. You also, your friends and your family, if you label them as your friends and your family, you've now also given somebody an into your personal life. These can be used for the elder fraud scams, the grandparent scams, the majority of all the scams. Now you've actually told somebody who your family is. Now they have some legitimate background to use when they call you and try to take advantage of you. Also, although this you guys are not the target audience, social media is also being used to recruit people to do the check fraud, the stolen check, to negotiate the cases, the checks. So oftentimes you'll see a signature or a name on the check and you assume that's the person involved. Well, they are involved. Whether or not they're culpable is a whole different story. Sometimes they are paid for their services. Sometimes they're legitimate victims themselves. But the social media is being used to recruit individuals to make some quick cash. So one of the things is to tell, especially like grandkids, college age kids who may have a new bank account. If you see those ads, it is too good to be true. You are committing a crime. Don't do it.
Eraina?
I think we oftentimes say, as has been mentioned, more is less, or less is more, excuse me. I think part of the difficulty is people want to share. People want people to be a part of their lives. So that's oftentimes hard to navigate around. What I will say is make sure you know who you are accepting as your friend. You may have Ray may be my friend on Facebook already, but then I get 4 new additional requests for Ray. So if you are in touch with that contact, reach out to them, let them know, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I'm observing. But I think part of it is just sometimes taking a step back, seeing how things can impact you. And like we said, so many connections can be made off of one post. If you want to share your vacation, wait till you get back home. I've learned that. You see people on social media all the time and you're like, really? So I just sometimes think it's the awareness, but we also are dealing with kind of that societal pressure. And I think it's transformed to all ages, not just the younger social media crowd of people need to know what's going on, what I'm doing. And that is not the case at all.
Just before Ray says, I used to love using the Facebook photos of my defendants that I was prosecuting, particularly the caregivers who had ripped off their client with thousands of dollars. Oh, here she is now in Portugal or Jamaica on a beach holiday in a 5-star resort. And I would love to put that up in front of the jury. This is what she was doing with this lady's money. It's so even defendants can really go out of their way to help us with social media. Ray.
Yeah, that's funny. I actually had several trials and thankfully they had pictures. I will tell you this, anything you post online can be used against you. And it will be used against you. I have had at least 2 trials where we've gotten pictures, and one time the judge said it was too inflammatory for us to do it. It's literally a guy just holding, all this cash and pictures like that, or vacation sitting next to a Lamborghini or whatever it might be. While we love that as investigators, it's dangerous to put your information out there. There is always going to be a risk. The younger crowd especially, like they care about their follower counts. But the bottom line is, unless you're trying to be a YouTube star or whatever, TikTok star, you should be putting things as private. You should keep it close in with people the information that goes out there, you got to trust people with that information because it can be used against you and it will be eventually used against you. You're going on vacation? Absolutely. People are scrolling the internet right now looking for information.
That's why federal employees shouldn't have themselves pictures. Interviewing job.
Well, can I just before we could do that, I want to get Kate's impression too, because obviously Kate, you've learned a lot in the last 2 or 3 years about the dangers of social media.
Yes, yes.
What would you say now?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert up here, but I would also say wait until you get home. If you've got great vacation pictures, do not post them till you get home. But the other thing that I don't think people think about is if there's been a death in the family, the best way to get information out to all your extended family and friends are to put the details of the funeral on the Facebook page and spread it out. It's the same criteria here that the people are going after that. They used to get that information out of the newspapers and go to that person's house because you know that they're in church or at a synagogue or someplace having a funeral. They also used to do that with weddings. Now weddings are not posted. I don't think they're even posted in the newspaper anymore, but there would be engagement pictures with when the wedding was planned. And there were a lot of people that would take advantage of that because they'd be out of the house all day long and you could go break in. So don't be airing your dirty laundry out there for everybody to check, because boy, they're really looking for that information.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes.
So I want to go back to the check washing, and you were talking about using gel pens. Anything more specific about the gel pens that we need to know?
Unfortunately, I don't have any more information on that. Just when I was in the conference, what they were saying is that I guess that they appear to be more difficult to remove than the ink pens.
Doesn't make any difference. A gel pen seeps into the fabric of the paper check, whereas a ballpoint pen sits on top of the paper. That's the difference between a gel pen and a ballpoint pen. I'm going to do one more question. We got to get back to the program. Bear with me, but our folks will be available afterwards. Okay.
I think I heard you say that if your bank, if somebody frauds you by getting your bank account number and stuff, the banks are required to reimburse you. It's the same for mutual fund companies. I have my life savings with Vanguard, Fidelity, and T. Rowe Price. And 10 years ago, I asked for their reimbursement policy if I was defrauded. And they sent me a 20-page fine print document. I had to have this software updated within 5 days, and this malware protect, yada yada, 20 pages worth. And if I was not current with those 20 pages, I was out, whatever. What are the laws today to protect people invested in mutual fund companies?
Wow.
I'll say you can go. I mean, I think it would depend on if they're FDIC insured. Of course, there's that. But then I think it's just going to depend on the company too, because if it depends on what's the situation, right? So how were you defrauded? If it was a situation where you voluntarily, maybe you didn't realize it was a fraud at the time, but sent your money somewhere, well, then I don't think the company is going to be liable for reimbursing you. It would depend. Yeah, so if it was a hack, if they got hacked, then I would think that they would be responsible for that. But I think it would matter about FDIC insured or not, because not everybody is. So if you have anything else to add to that, Ray?
I think it's a gray area. And that unfortunately is the truth. But generally speaking, even if you were hacked, maybe it depends a little bit on the circumstances. A lot of banks have, additional terms of service and conditions, but the Federal Trade Commission, the FDIC, you do have protections. I think it would fall on the bank to have to prove that somehow you were negligent, maybe and not, maybe if your password was 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't necessarily know. I think the vast majority of victims that have fallen for, or not fallen for, but been involved in a hack or something that they had no involvement in or weren't responsible for, have gotten their money back. Now, just as stated, totally different. If you give your information to someone, that is a different story. Also, some business accounts have additional requirements. The businesses could be held liable, but a personal account is usually pretty heavily protected. And I think it would ultimately fall on them to prove that somehow you were not on top of your security, or you did something outside their terms of service.
Okay, thank you. I want to broaden the discussion a little bit. I want to start with Eraina. You probably heard me say during my slide presentation, one of the biggest barriers that I came across was silence. And there's a reluctance by victims of fraud to speak out and tell professionals, because in my experience, they are afraid of what an adult child might do with them, or some other government agency might do with them, like put them into a protected environment like a nursing home. How do you approach the kind of client who is very reluctant to tell you? You've had a report come in from a neighbor, and how do you deal with that and get through that barrier of silence and embarrassment?
Sure. So the first thing I will say is, as Adult Protective Services, we typically come to your home for that initial visit unannounced. So it's an extra layer of, I'm coming to your home, knocking on your door, introducing myself, and trying to get to know you. But also at the same time, I'm trying to figure out and validate or figure out information based around this report that has said all of this information. So little me with my badge, is at your door. I think that part of it is rapport building. Yes, we have a time period to do the investigation, but I'm a stranger and I want to know all of your personal information, in particular, your banking information. Anybody can file a report against or make a report against anybody. So it could be a neighbor, it could be the bank, it could be a child, it could be, again, anyone. But it's that gaining trust and showing that you're an ally and you want to support them. And just to add briefly, you have some people who I've knocked on their door, introduced myself to them, and it was a waterfall. Everything that I didn't have to ask any questions because they were just so willing to share. But there's other people who they don't want to share. I think we talked about this earlier. They don't want to believe that they are a victim of a scam because of whatever reason. It could be some sort of cognitive barrier. It could be that they are so deeply involved in that scam that this is their actual reality. So it's not a one size fit all approach. You have to meet that individual where they're at. And some people I've had on my caseload will just never admit nothing is wrong, or they say it's something that they're approving of.
Thank you. Carl, I want to ask you this, again, based upon the experiences I've had. If somebody was a victim of a fraud in Fairfax County and they called your police department and gave information that the suspect probably had an accent, is probably overseas, is your department trained to respond in a certain way to deal with that inquiry? Because some police departments, as you probably know, would turn around and say, well, there's nothing we can do. Overseas, goodbye. Is there anything in Fairfax County or police department that you're training your officers to take these reports more seriously?
Well, they're definitely taken seriously. One of the things we do have as a local police department is a little bit more strict jurisdictional powers, police powers. So what we will do is, what we usually do is, what I would always do is I would work the investigation as far as I could, get as many leads as I possibly could. And if it leaves the United States and unfortunately there's the end of my authority, I would reach out to one of the federal law enforcement agencies, the FBI, Homeland Security, and see, because generally they do. They have a little bit. They have more reach internationally to maybe reach out and speak to an agent who's stationed there to go talk to somebody or follow up inside that country.
Well, that's a good segue to Jamie. And again, I'm sorry to ask this question, but it's based upon my experience. Say the loss to the victim is under $25,000, but Carl's been working it hard, but he can't do with it anymore because the suspect is definitely overseas. and it comes to your agency and somebody within the FIA says, 25 grand? That's not enough. How would you respond to that?
Yes, so that happens a lot. And we were actually talking about this before this. So a few things to add here. So one thing we would do if that happened, we have a form for the public to complain online through ic3.gov. So there's a way for the public to submit complaints. So
Can I stop you there just for a second?
Yes.
Because some people don't know what ic3.gov is. Can you explain what that stands for? What it is?
Absolutely. So it stands for Internet Crime Complaint Center. So it's ic3.gov, and it's a website for the public to use to report really any type of crime. And it's run by the FBI, but it's available to really any law enforcement. So anybody sitting up here, they can get access to it to be able to query the database. So what I would do if Kyle came to me and said, I have this victim I've been working with, here's the situation, I would take all the information from him and I would do a lot of things, but one thing I would do is go into IC3 and I would see if there have been any other complaints by any other victims referencing the same subject, maybe the same phone number, same email address, same company, anything like that, just to see if I can really beef it up and look for any additional victims. I would also look internally. Of course, we have a system for our case management system. I would look there. So I would do a bunch of different database checks to see if this is a bigger issue. If it's not, that doesn't mean that's the end, but our struggle too, as the FBI, is we have to now convince the US Attorney's Office, which you can relate to, we have to convince a prosecutor to take on this case with us and be willing to prosecute, which is sometimes our challenge, but we do have a higher threshold that we're looking for. You know, I wrote it down, we get a lot of complaints. So just last year, we had over 500,000 complaints that came into IC3. And that is just IC3. So we have other forums that people can complain to. People can call in and make a complaint. People can walk into the office and make a complaint. So that 500,000 figure is only accounting for complaints that were made in 2022 alone through IC3. So as you can imagine, we get a lot of complaints that come in that we cannot always follow up on and address. But this is why I always say it's so important to report it, even if it's a small amount, because when we do have that situation where Kyle or some other local PD comes to us with this information, we can now justify being able to open an investigation. Because a lot of times without that, we just cannot justify opening a case if there is just one person who lost $25,000, unfortunately. And I know that is a lot of money for one person. That would be a lot of money for me. But as a federal organization, we have to unfortunately, go after the larger targets. And I'll touch on the international thing as well, if you would like. So we do have legal attaché offices throughout many different countries, and we do work with them. So a lot of times when these cases do reach overseas, we can work with our partners overseas who are there locally in the countries, developing relationships with their law enforcement. So sometimes it does depend. We have better relationships with some countries than others, as you can imagine. There are some countries where if you send your money there, the likelihood of us being able to do anything is very low. And that's just because of relationships, that the US has or does not have with that country. And unfortunately, that falls out of our hands. But we have established some good relationships with different countries. Some countries in Africa, I mentioned India earlier, that we have established some relationships with, where even if we are not able to prosecute them here in the US, we can at least pass that information over to the local authorities there, and they will actually do something about it sometimes.
Great, thank you. Ray, is there an... Okay, and then we'll come back to you, sir. Okay, yeah.
Can any of you address the various publisher clearinghouse scams?
You've had experience of that?
No one's going to take that one. I know that. So I guess I'll take it. Yeah, so sweepstakes scams, I mean, that's been going on since I became a postal inspector. They use a lot of different names, but they generally all look like they're from the Publishers Clearinghouse. Someone used the exact name, some of them changed their name. A lot of that does initiate through the mail. Information is bought and sold, your personal address, your phone numbers, various information about you is out there. It's out there on me as well. They'll use those lists. They'll mail out different pieces of scam mail telling you that maybe you won $1 million or $2 million. If you actually respond to that mailing and you actually mail something to whatever the address is, your information will be sold again at a premium because they now think you believe that this is actually true. So when you respond to those letters, you've really put yourself now in jeopardy. You're most likely going to get a call because they're going to ask for your phone number, your address, all your information you're going to put online, and they're going to call you and tell you you won $1 million or you won $25 million. And they're going to make you believe it's true for a little while. They're going to get you on the hook, get you all excited. And then eventually something's going to happen, like you need to pay your taxes on it first. You need to pay an import, whatever it might be. You'll get, it'll start with taxes. They'll come up with new ones and they'll just keep coming back with different advance payments until, essentially you either run out of money or you realize it's a scam. Unfortunately, a lot of our victims will run out of money before they realize they have been defrauded. It happens quite frequently. So one thing, obviously, everyone in this room, you guys are going to be the ones that go out and share the information and some of the stories and information we're providing you. There are certain things you can look for when you're speaking to your friends, your family, people that you may think could be susceptible to this. One thing that when I speak to family members, they usually tell me that, they seem more secretive or more private. They're receiving calls, but not really wanting to say who they spoke to on the phone. They seem to get a lot of junk mail. A lot of mail is piled up. A lot of it says sweepstakes on it. And we don't necessarily look at a piece of mail and say, well, that's definitely a scam. Unfortunately, what happens is it may not definitely be a scam, but the information is sold until it gets to a scammer. Every time you provide your information, it's sold. Marketing companies sell that information, and a lot of them don't care who they sell it to. And that's how your information gets out. So if you respond to a mailing like that, you're going to continue forever until you change your number, you change your address, you're going to continue to get a lot. So as an indicator, if you start seeing a lot of junk mail showing up at an address, that should be a red flag for you. So definitely keep your eyes open for that. And obviously, if you find out someone fell for one of these scams, definitely report it. As mentioned, it's sad that we can't take every single victim's case that comes in the door. What we will ask from you, though, is at the very least, file the report. IC3, there's also the Federal Trade Commission has one. Both I have access to both of them. Any fraud investigator can get access to both of them. I use IC3 plenty. And what that does is we get one complaint from a victim. I'm going to go look and see, has anyone else filed a complaint that I can match up? The same phone number was used, the same alias. The guy called himself Joe Blow. Well, I'm going to look up and see in all the narratives that were written up by the victims, did someone mention Joe Blow? And if that matches, I might realize that this is connected. So all of a sudden, my $25,000 case becomes over 100 grand. Now I got something maybe to pitch to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So it is absolutely imperative, even if you don't even want to deal with law enforcement, maybe it was $400, it's just not worth the trouble to you. Report it, because you don't know, this person may be doing it, and it may be hundreds, even thousands of victims that are reporting it. And trust me, if there are 1,000 victims, you will get a federal agent involved or interested in your case. So please just report it and look for those indicators.
Thank you, Ray. Yes.
Okay, we have got a lot of questions coming in online, and I just don't think we're going to get to them. So I'm going to ask if you can quickly address these. One is, can someone talk about cash apps? That's one. Two is, can someone, is scratching or blacking out the 3 digits on the back of your credit card okay? Will merchants still take it? And then if someone can talk about title frauds, home title frauds.
Okay, so starting with cash apps.
I mean, is there anything more specific? They're definitely being, well, all right. So I've used them. So I've used them to send money to.
Can you talk about a
family
name couple of them so they can identify?
Yeah, sure.
them?
So things like Zelle, Venmo, those sorts of things. So I know Zelle goes through the bank, but Venmo, for example, I've used it. If I didn't completely trust it, I wouldn't, but they are being used for fraud as well. So while they are legitimate companies that do provide a service and people use them to send money to family and friends, they are also being utilized as a way to send money to scammers. But I think it really it should be treated like anything else. So it should be treated just like you would treat your bank account, just don't send money to someone that you've never met, that sort of thing. So it's just another method of sending money to someone, which just like a bank is legitimate and you use it for legitimate purposes. The cash apps are the same way. So they can be used for legitimate reasons, but they're also being used in scams.
And do you have any advice? Because a lot of these Venmo apps, they're on your smartphone.
Right.
And if somebody were to steal your smartphone, is there anything you should be doing about that?
Yeah, so I think some of them might have that additional like two-factor authentication where you have to put your thumbprint or anything like that. Anytime you have that option to add it, please add it. It is an extra step and it is frustrating sometimes to have to get a code to your text message to add it in, but it's worth it in the end if it's going to save you money. So yeah, I think there are, I can't name any, if maybe you guys know that if someone does get your phone, they could just open it up without the two-factor authentication. But any opportunity you have to add it, I would add it.
Okay, thank you. What was the second one after cash apps? Oh yeah, crossing out the 3-digit security code on the back. I mean, I've never had somebody look at it. You just tap it normally, don't you, with a credit card, right?
I can answer that one.
Okay.
You need the 3-digit code on the back of a credit card for a non-in-person transaction. If you're doing a transaction online, anywhere where you are not physically present with your card, you need to give the merchant those 3 numbers. So scratching out those 3 numbers doesn't help the individual and makes it more difficult for them to use the card in a non-in-person event. A merchant doesn't look for those 3 numbers. A merchant looks for the magnetic strip or the magnetic chip on the card. So that's the protection aspect of it with that 3 digits on the back of the card. It's for not in-person transactions. But for every credit card you have, you should have the credit card company alerting you that your card has been used for a non-in-person transaction. That protects you. Home title.
Yeah. Yeah, Eraina?
I can speak a little bit about it. We have not, or I have not seen one yet, but I know that there have been some in the past. And in a nutshell, somebody either owns a property and they sign that property off to somebody else, potentially at a much reduced rate than what the property is actually valued at. For example, the property may be valued at $2 million. And the scam artist convince you to sell it to them for $500,000. In addition to that, there has been, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's also been an increase of vacant properties having a title created for a vacant property, which may be owned by somebody else, but they sell that property and now there are multiple owners, and it just can become a really nasty battle as far as who actually owns that said property.
Thank you. Any other questions from online that you wanted to pose?
Anyone want to address the recent Facebook protections? The question is, are they any better?
Facebook protections.
Probably not. But I don't have anything else to add, but just any opportunity to make your account private, just do it.
Right.
Yeah, I can't speak. I'm not exactly sure what the new policies are at Facebook. I mean, nothing really changes from the investigator standpoint. Maybe it protects you to a certain extent, but if you put the information publicly out there, I mean, it's out there and it's going to be captured by somebody permanently and sold and transferred, and it's going to be used against you, just as I said. So regardless of whatever policy is in place, it doesn't change the fact that we need to be secure and pay attention to our social media accounts.
Yeah, and I just want to add about social media too. a lot of times, even if you're not putting the information out there yourself, all these apps that we download, we're constantly giving permissions to the app, which is allowing them to have access to certain things on our phone. And we're giving all this information to Apple. And so that's one thing as well, that just, we don't read, we just accept. I've done it too, but we are allowing all these companies that we download the apps for, we're allowing them access to our phones and our information.
Thank you.
All those free apps.
Yes.
That's where the money comes from.
Exactly.
Kate, something that came into my mind, which I didn't ask you before, when you were asked to buy all these gift cards, what was the biggest amount individually you were asked to purchase? And so did you go to your financial institution and withdraw your money every time when you needed cash? Or did you not have to go to the bank and withdraw? Okay. Did anybody at any of these stores that you were purchasing gift cards recognize you and say, you know, you've been coming a few times. Are you sure you're not a victim of a fraud?
Should have been a red flag to myself. Oh, I'm sorry. That should have been a red flag to myself, that for some reason I felt like I shouldn't be going to the same place all the time. So
is that what, quote, Tony told you to do, go to different places?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is indeed another red flag, correct?
Yes.
Okay. As we sort of come to a close soon, I just want to give each of you panelists an opportunity. One thing I've learned as a prosecutor is the value of cross collaboration with other agencies. I mean, you are a representation of that right now today. If we could clone you all and move you around the county and move around the country, I tell you what, we could really catch a lot of crooks. Can you imagine Postal Inspector and the FBI and Carl working together? Oh my gosh. And then Eraina just keeping the clients calm. It'd be brilliant. So what I want to ask you is, there's a lot of people out there saying, oh, it's only going to get worse, which it is, but there's a lot of, for me, there's a lot of optimism too. I'm seeing a lot of progress being made from when I started out in 1996. Starting with Jamie, what do you see as some of the good things that are happening with cooperation and collaboration, and what more can be done to bring this collaboration to a better point?
Yeah, so it seems like there's always a lot that we're trying to do. So, I mean, even in 2017, when Congress enacted this Elder Justice Initiative, and it caused all the U.S. attorneys' offices to establish sort of a task force for elder justice. And even in the FBI, we have at every office, there has to be someone like me that goes out and gives these presentations. And because awareness is a huge thing, I think that is the most important thing, because as you heard, we got over 500,000 complaints from people, and that doesn't account for all the people that are not reporting this. This is just people that are reporting. And there are only so many of us, and there's only so much we can do. And I think a huge part of this is awareness and making people aware, because, you know, at the end of the day, you're the ones that have the closest relationships with your families, with your parents, with your siblings, with your neighbors, and you guys can be looking for these red flags that you're hearing today. So I think it is important, these types of things, to make people aware. Because Kate, I don't know if you mentioned that you had not heard of a romance scam before that was happening or not. But that's something that, you know, to us as law enforcement, we think that everybody knows that this is happening, but that's not the reality. Is sometimes this might be the first time you're hearing about these scams. So I think things like this are really important. I know we work together a lot. There are all sorts of task force being established always for, you know, fraud in general, but for elder fraud. So there's always more that we can do, but just know that we are trying our best given the circumstances.
Great. Kyle.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the awareness part. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do. You know, we can always try to work as many cases as we can and put as many bad guys behind bars as possible. And, you know, that's a great thing to shoot for. But as she said, get the awareness out. You guys pass it on, who pass it on, who can pass it on. Look for these red flags that you picked up today. Tell friends and family about it. You know, we're lucky in this area that we have the federal government right here, and there's lots of cooperation that that goes on, which is great. I've worked several cases with a lot of the federal agencies. So we're doing what we can do as best as possible, and then getting the word out. And that involves AARP and you guys and everyone out there, just spreading the word, what to watch out for and looking out for each other is the best thing we can do.
Thank you. And Eraina, I'm curious with your response, are you involved in a local county like Elder Justice Task Force or anything like that?
Yeah, so at the local level, there's multiple task force, multiple opportunities. Speaking specifically to scams and more so financial scams, we have an entire task force that is surrounding that. As I mentioned earlier, we partner with all the agencies at this table to run that task force. As everybody has kind of said, if you see something, say something. I think that APS, and I think somebody said it earlier, they're going to get in trouble, but is underutilized in the fact that people oftentimes want to keep things quiet or, this too shall pass. Our role is not a punitive agency. We collaborate with other agencies and are able to provide resources for those cases that come to us. So again, if you see something, say something. You may not be able to reach your loved one or talk to your loved one because of that relationship you have, but sometimes, us who are unknown to that person may be able to build that relationship and make that difference. And they may be a little bit more accepting of the resources that we're able to provide them.
Thank you. Ray.
Yes, obviously, just adding on to what they've said, I mean, outreach is the most important thing we can do. I loved hearing your story. I'm sorry you had to go through it. And I don't think anybody here wants to have to go through that or have any family or friends to go through that. So outreach is the best thing we can do. Because once you become a victim, yeah, we love catching the bad guys. That's why we do what we do. We love putting the cuffs on these guys and putting them in prison. Unfortunately, though, you're still the victim. You're still going to be dealing with this for years on end. It's going to devastate your life. I can't tell you how many seniors have lost their life savings that I have met, not just lost it, but are heavily in debt. I have cases that involve the churches where investment scams were being perpetrated. I mean, fraud is all around us. You have to look for it. You have to, unfortunately, be skeptical in these times when it comes to financial information. You got to be very, very careful who you trust. The only thing I can say is we all work well as a team, all of us. We get information from everybody on this table. We work together. A lot of my cases involve these agencies and other agencies that aren't here today. So anybody you report it to, we all kind of, work together. And that's our ultimate goal. But again, the most important thing for you and all of you is to try to prevent this from happening. And then if something happens, because fraud can happen to you at no fault of your own, it can happen. You can be as safe as you want. It just unfortunately affected you. You got to know how to respond to it, right? And what to do. And that I hope you've learned here today. If not, our information will be here. Feel free to give any of us a call. We'd be happy to help.
Terrific. And Kate, any final words from you?
I actually do. To go back to your question about, did anyone ask me why I was buying so many gift cards rather? No one ever asked me. The only time I've ever been asked about a transaction like that was several weeks ago when I was about to make settlement on the new house. I hadn't gotten all of my money from the fire, the claim. So my brother-in-law and sister lent me money to deposit. So I had it in the bank to do that. And the woman stopped me and said, "Do you know who this check is from? Do you?" And I thought, why are you asking me? Nobody asked me when I was spending my money.
Right.
But, now that I finally have some money, I mean, maybe she was looking at my, my report, my bank account and saw how low it had gotten. And now I was putting this money in. But that's the only time anyone has ever said anything to me.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, before I hand back to Trudy, again, on your behalf, I just want to thank you all. I've got a real sense of there's camaraderie, collaboration, cooperation going on in Fairfax County, which says a lot for your jurisdiction here. And I want to pass on just one word that my late father, who I really loved so much. He was a former bomber pilot in World War II and survived 79 bombing missions. He had a great sense of humor. And a few years ago, he called my wife and I up and he said, "We want you to be the first to know that we've just booked our first ski vacation." And I said, "Oh, Dad, please, Mom doesn't need to go and learn to be ski at her age. He says, you don't know what we mean by a ski vacation. He says the word ski, S-K-I, spend, kids, inheritance. And he wanted me to know that he and my mother just booked their 29th cruise, but this time it was on the concierge deck with a butler. And he says, this is money you and your sister will never, ever see. And so I'm not suggesting you should be extravagant, but I am saying that you should never feel guilty about spending money on yourselves, okay? But when you do, and if you do have children, please do me a favor and tell them you are on a skiing vacation, okay? So that's good. So with that, again, thank you to our panelists. You've been fantastic. And I'm going to hand back over to Trudy. Thank you, Trudy.
I can't top that. I just want to say thank you to all of our volunteers, specifically to Martin Bailey, who was the project manager for Scam Jam this year, for our friends at Silver Shield, the initiative, to Jamie, to Kyle, to Eraina, to Ray, and Kate. So nice to meet you and so delighted to have you here with us to share that information. And also a big thank you to the folks here at OLLI for the technical support and the use of their facility. And just a reminder, you can visit aarp.org Fraud Watch Network for lots more information, for lots more resources. Program today has been recorded. You'll get a link to that recording and a follow-up email, and all of the resources that we talked about and contact information for all of these agencies will be located there as well. The tables are still set up for those of you who are in-house with more information to how to get in contact with some of our folks. And it's time for lunch. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our virtual audience for sticking with us today as well. AARP.org, lots more information.